Once Tim was done, Overseer Lior from the food industry came over with bread and other foods, so that his audience could feel the effectiveness of his spices, seasonings, butter, and so on. Of course, everyone fell in love with them. Just looking at the dried spices and seasonings made their tongues salivate. The men sprinkled the different seasonings and spices on their meat and felt like they were in heaven. The juiciness, the tenderness. How could food taste so good? The meat was well cooked. It had an earthy color and a stringy feel to it. As they savored the meat, they began to eat like pigs without even knowing it. Some of the meat was also deep fried and had a crisp feel to them. They were either sprinkled with salt and pepper or garlic. The single men only had one thought right now. Who cooked this meat? Can they marry them? They had to admit the spiciness and seasonings had improved compared to last week's results. They were still eating the horse meat from the previous attack on Baymard, and it was at this time that they truly felt grateful to their enemies. They sincerely thanked their enemies for dropping them several stacks of meat in Baymard. Once the chicken was done, they started licking their fingers. Delicious! There were also several fried rice and vegetable dishes that were done with oil, powdered ginger, garlic, and vinegar. The butter, on the other hand, was a real treat. The rich, soft feel of the butter on the bread made them feel like they were floating on clouds. The food industry had produced 2 types of butter, salted and non-salted. Was this how food was supposed to taste? They couldn't help but feel that they had been eating dogs all through their lives. They began to wonder how they had ever coped all through the years. How could they go back to eating those awful dishes? No way. They'd rather starve. Right now, their taste buds had been upgraded, and they had already started forgetting what the good they used to cook tasted like. Since they discovered that food was supposed to taste like this, most of the men had gone to the market to buy the products that were supplied by the food company to these stores. These products were now seen as essentials in their homes. Chief Wiggins and Tim were seriously having multiple food orgasms in their mouths. It was truly mouth-watering. They couldn't help but give 2 thumbs up to Overseer Lior. On the other hand, Overseer Lior, who was being praised, kept thinking about what kind of food house he should build in future. With these new delicacies, wasn't his world not complete? Hell yeah! It was more than complete. For now, he decided to put a stop to his food house construction. What if His Highness made more food stuff? This situation was indeed tricky. Landon, who was oblivious to Overseer Lior's food madness, continued tasting all the different dishes placed in front of him. Overall, Landon was utterly impressed as well. All the industries had heeded to his advice and really improved their products compared to last week. Once all the presentations were done, they started discussing all the issues within their industries and how to further improve their results. Your Highness, now that we have pens, what do we do with the excess chalk in stock? A supervisor asked. Landon thought for a while. Chalk itself has several uses. It was good for raising soil acidity, hence increasing the agricultural yield of the farms. There were several types of chalks, like calcium carbonate, magnesium calcium, and so on. In addition, it aids in removing perspiration and reduces slipping. Hence, it was already used by the military for weightlifting, tug-of-war, rock climbing, and other gymnastics. Chalk was also used in house construction and served as mild abrasives for several other industries, like toothpaste. That's why it was very important for them to continue producing chalk. For now, still produce the same amount of chalk powder, but limit the amount that is molded into chalk sticks. Landon replied. All the men, irrespective of which department or industry they were from, asked Landon multiple questions. And when Landon answered them, they would immediately jotted down everything, so as not to forget Landon's instructions. After all, next week, they were to show how they implemented His Highness's instructions and advice to their industries. No one wanted to let Landon down. Once Landon was done with the group, he headed towards the estate, which was presently known as the hospital. Today, he had a meeting with all the doctors and some nurses there. Not all the nurses could come as they couldn't close down the hospital, school, military, and industry clinics for the meeting. Today, Landon just wanted to know the results about his sanitation advice, and first aid methods were working on the patients. Landon had been teaching them basic first aid since May. With the help of hydrogen peroxide, wounds were cleaned up properly. The first time hydrogen peroxide was used, the doctors, nurse, and even the patients were shocked. How come the injured area was foaming up, yet it didn't hurt at all? And how can the dried blood on the wound come out with just a few swipes with a clean cloth? Anyway, they were thoroughly impressed with the hydrogen peroxide. The medicated alcohol, on the other hand, had the patients screaming out loud. Although they hated it, they knew that alcohol was normally needed in treating wounds. Landon also taught them the importance of using aloe vera as an anesthetic after treating the wounds. With the help of the thin medical rubber gloves and other hospital wear, the doctors and nurses worked properly without spreading blood here and there, or further contaminating the patients. Soap was also used to clean the floors and other surfaces within the hospital, leaving the air with a fresh, clean smell. When Landon got to the hospital, he was somewhat shocked at the alarming situation in there. Well, it was alarming to him anyway. He had forgotten that children could still have such illnesses. Your Highness, this week, we have admitted over 100 children in the hospital. They were all infected with the scourge creeper, chickenpox. While Landon was busy dealing with the sick, Slytherin Cord had made his way to the city of Sangria. Finally, he was going to catch that bastard, who called himself the Ghostly Prince. It was finally time.
Sangria City. Standing in front of Slytherin were one of his trusted aides and 4 other soldiers under his command. So, as not to draw too much attention onto himself, he had left thousands of his men back at his base in Ingrill City, and had come to Sangria City with just 150 men. His men had all blended in with the peasants and actually looked like servants and farmers. Today, Slytherin had already received word that the Ghostly Prince would leave the Quincy Inn and head towards the Haunted Plain of Sangria. The Haunted Plain was a cemetery located in the outskirts of Sangria that was believed to be cursed. People didn't go there during the night time due to the frightening folk tales that were said about the cemetery. That's why all burials were only done during the day. Those who were brave enough to go there at night never came back to their families. It was believed that the ancestors of their enemies haunted the cemetery and were thirsty for blood. It was also believed that once the ancestors got a hold of a living person, they would suck out all the blood from that person's body, leaving only a dried-out corpse at the end. Boss. We had observed that place every night for the past 4 days. The masked man would go there with his men for a few hours before coming back to the Quincy Inn, one of Slytherin's subordinates said. Did he meet anyone there? Boss. Except for the hooded woman that he met on the first day, he hasn't met anyone else. If that's the case, then he might be using that place as a way to send messages to his subordinates. How many men does he have with him each time he goes to the cemetery? Boss. He always takes 15 men with him to the cemetery. Slytherin nodded as he listened. Tonight, I will only take 30 men for the mission. Tell the rest of the men to wait outside the gates of Sangria. Once this mission is over, we will be heading out immediately. Slytherin commanded. The night was dark, cold, and somewhat foggy. All around, sounds of frogs could be heard, croaking away, as well as the loud chirps of crickets. Creak.
Creak.
Creak. The rain that fell during the day had finally stopped, leaving most of the footpaths muddy. Slytherin and his men moved stealthily as they followed their enemies towards the cemetery. Today, they wore all black clothing, leaving only their eyes visible for all to see. They indeed looked like assassins. Even with the pale moonlight cast on them, one would have to struggle just to make them out. Once the Ghostly Prince and his entourage passed through the cemetery gate, Slytherin signaled for his men to stop. The cemetery was also shrouded with fog and gave off an eerie feeling to it. From what his subordinates had found out, there was a secret base located at the back of the cemetery. It was hidden away by the bushes and trees. During the day, his men had been able to pinpoint where exactly the entrance to the base was. Amongst the 30 subordinates that had followed him, 10 were tasked with surrounding the enemy's base, while the other 20 would follow him quietly into the base. There were 2 enemy guards standing at the door of the base. Slytherin needed a distraction. One of his men shot 2 arrows a little further from the enemy base. Thup! Thup! Did you hear that? One of the guards asked. Yeah, I did. I'll go check it out. The noise was coming towards a grave that stood a little farther away from the base's entrance. Once that guard left, 2 other arrows were shot again. Thup! Thup! The last guard standing by the entrance heard sounds coming from a different direction and decided to check it out as well. The fog within the cemetery didn't help much because he couldn't see anything from where he was. Once the man left, Slytherin signaled for those 10 men who were supposed to surround the base to deal with the guards while he made his way with the rest towards the base. Very quickly, they entered the base and spotted 5 more guards patrolling another hallway. Boss, what do we do now? Slytherin bit his lips and thought for a while. He needed this operation to be done quietly and without a hitch. He couldn't allow that bastard to get a chance at escaping. At the start, when Eli tasked him on getting information on the ghostly prince, he really didn't have any personal vendetta with the bastard. But for the first time in his life, he had failed a mission. Who would believe that he, Slytherin Cord, the master of the Empire's best intelligence organization, would fail a mission? He, a person whom even the king wanted to hire but couldn't. At his level, he could be working for several empires if he wanted to. In fact, the first time Slytherin had told Prince Eli that he had failed the mission over dinner, Eli looked at the bottles close to Slytherin and concluded that Slytherin was drunk. It was too unbelievable. Even if people had heard that he had failed a mission, no one would believe it. That was how good his success rate was. And at that point, Slytherin became more and more determined to catch this mysterious ghostly prince. It became an obsession to him. He had even started calling the ghostly prince as his little white rabbit. He called him Little White Rabbit because rabbit stew was his best dish. And little because he truly felt like no one could outsmart him. He honestly couldn't wait to slit the throat of the man who gave him so much pain throughout these few months. He would spend sleepless nights stalking and tracking down the ghostly prince's movements, but he could never really pinpoint where his little white rabbit's hideout was. But the third time he took over the mission, he had more than 80% of the men who followed him on the mission killed at once. At this point, he had changed the ghostly prince's name from Little White Rabbit to Bastard. Getting rabbit stew. Right now, he wanted to eat the rabbit's flesh raw. It was then that he had developed bad blood with the bastard. This time, he wanted to skin the bastard's face and place it on his wall at home. Anyway, right now Slytherin had to make sure that their actions didn't alert the 5 guards ahead of them. He looked up at the wooden frames on the ceilings and his eyes lit up. Follow my lead. Slytherin placed his hands and legs on the walls, as if he were doing a sideways leg split. He looked like Jean-Claude Van Damme as he climbed up the narrow walls. The hallway they were in had extremely narrow walls, as it was closer to the entrance. Once they had all gotten onto the wooden ceiling frames, they quietly moved on the frames towards an even bigger hallway. This hallway was the one that had 5 guards patrolling on it. As they moved, they began to listen to the conversation of all the patrolling guards. They had learned that the ghostly prince was still having his meeting in a room 2 hallways away from them. They continued in ahead and finally arrived at the last hallway. Slytherin signaled for his men to move. 6 men quickly dropped from above, landing on the 3 guards guarding a large wooden door. Before the enemy guards could react, the men quickly placed their hands on their enemies' mouths and used their blades to silence them. Once that was done, they quickly moved the bodies to the sides. As they dragged the bodies, Slytherin and the rest of the men on the ceiling dropped down. Be careful. This bastard is tricky, Slytherin warned, as he stood in front of the large wooden door with a victory smile on his face. Bam!
The door was kicked down, and the men quickly rushed in. But to their surprise, there was no one in sight. Forget no one, there was absolutely nothing in the room. No tables, no chairs, nothing. Why was this room guarded if no one was in there? At this point, they all became solemn. Looking for me? 2 groups of men faced each other as they prepared for battle. Slytherin was really pissed off now. After all his planning, traveling, and scheming, he still ended up in this bastard's trap. Wasn't this the greatest disgrace to his name? It was all this bastard's fault. Why couldn't he just die? Damn. William had entered the room with 10 men. So Slytherin thought that this was all the people he had. Slytherin's reports stated that William usually came here with 15 people. And since they had taken care of the 5 guards so far, so Slytherin thought it was logical for William to only have 10 men right now. So either way, Slytherin still had his victory smile on. So what if I'm looking for you? Even if you succeeded in trapping me and men here, do you really think that you are enough to stop me? HMMP. Enough chit-chat. Hand over your life, and I might just let you go, Slytherin said coldly. William smiled. Silly me. Did you think that these were all my men? Immediately 5 more came out. Just where did those men come from? Slytherin couldn't help but wonder. Right now it was 15 men to 15 men, excluding him and the bastard. So now the battle was even. But so what? He was still going to kill the weasel. Like I said, hand over your life, and I might spare you, Slytherin repeated again coldly. Everyone on William's side was utterly confused with what Slytherin had said. Hand over your life. Aren't you the one who is trapped now? Just where did you get your confidence from? William looked at the delusional Slytherin and knew that this man was conceited. It was clear that Slytherin had always thought that he was far better than everyone else. Confidence was a good thing, but it could sometimes lead one to underestimate their enemies. Right now, William's 50 hidden knights had taken care of Slytherin's subordinates that were supposed to surround the perimeter. William didn't want to use his hidden guards to fight with Slytherin, so he used the other men who usually followed him during the daytime to fight this battle. You're right. Let's cut the bullsh *** and get down to business, shall we? Immediately, William swung his sharp iron sword at the men who were acting as shields. Slytherin's men had formed a circle around him, in an attempt to shield him from the enemy. The battle had finally begun. Clink! The enemy blocked William's attack. As his veins bulged through his arms, William swung his sword again and ended his attack with a kick on his enemy's chest. Their formation was broken. The enemy quickly got up from the ground and yelled angrily, "Bastard! D!" The enemy swung his sword horizontally at full swing as he aimed for William's neck. William immediately fell backwards towards the ground as a way of ducking. He quickly used his back and hands to kick off from the ground and used his legs to punch the chin and face of his enemy. "Ah!" the enemy cried. Blood was oozing out of his enemy's nostrils. Once he was up from the ground, he swung his sword with all his might and instantly cut his enemy's head off cleanly. Phoo! The head rolled on the floor as blood oozed out through the dead man's neck. The body shook like a chicken whose head had been cut off. Just as William was about to look at the situation in the room, another enemy approached him. Clink! As the battle in the room went on, Slytherin's eyes opened wide as 3 of his men dropped to the floor like flies, while his enemy's side didn't even loose a single man. Why did it turn out like this? At this point, he had to look for a way to escape. He looked around the room, and when he saw a window at the corner, his eyes lit up. William's men fought and kept pushing on, as they tried to get to Slytherin, who was now making his escape through the window. Slytherin quickly smashed the wooden window frames and jumped out. He quickly escaped with 4 of his men, as he passed through the bushes in the cemetery. William, who had seen Slytherin escape, told 4 of his men to follow them. As Slytherin ran, he was shocked to see William's men on his tail. "Damn! Boss, I'll hold them off." With that, 2 of his subordinates stopped and drew their swords from the sheath that was strapped behind their backs. They steadied themselves in preparation for the fight. Clink, clink, clink. As Slytherin ran, he kept hearing the sounds of swords hitting one another. He knew that his men would definitely die tonight. It was not that Slytherin cared for their lives, or had any deep affection for them. It was just that training new staff or knights would take years to do, and was already a hassle to him. Why would he feel bad if they died for him? Wasn't he their boss? Weren't they supposed to fight for him? Men like him only really cared about raising their armies and conquering new territories, people, or objects. Death was an everyday occurrence here, so why would Slytherin feel bad? It was his men's duty to die for him, and they had successfully fulfilled it. What more could he say? Once they were closer to their horses, The other 2 men who were left with Slytherin stayed behind in order to stall the enemies from getting to Slytherin. Slytherin quickly got on his horse and made his way towards the gates of Sangria. He needed to leave quickly with the rest of his men, who were already waiting for him outside the gates. As he left, he couldn't help but curse that bastard ghostly prince. He swore that he would eat the bastard's flesh and drink his blood when he succeeded. William stood in the cemetery as he faced all 66 of his men, who were standing by his side and waiting for the rest to arrive. Right now, they were waiting for the 4 who were sent to deal with Slytherin's fleeing group. For tonight's show, William had come here with 70 men. He had kept 50 men as secret guards around the cemetery, 10 guarding the base and 10 around him. The first 2 men guarding the base weren't injured by Slytherin's men, as the hidden guards easily took care of the enemies once Slytherin successfully went into the base. It was only the 3 men guarding the large wooden door that got injured. Some were stabbed on their backs and others in their bellies. But so far no one had died. Once the 4 men were back, they gave their report to William. "My lord, we have completed the mission," they said as they knelt down in front of him. "Is Slytherin Cord dead?" "No, my lord." "What about his men who were fleeing with him?" "All dead, my lord." "And his men outside the gates?" "All dead, my lord." "Good." Actually, William's plan was never kill Slytherin. Slytherin was a key chess piece in Eli's rise to power. With Slytherin's help, Eli could easily take care of his siblings. William didn't want to start attacking any of them until a winner emerged from the group. Why go through all that stress when he could just kill the winner? William was clear on his thoughts. If the winner didn't step down from the throne, then the winner had to die, simple. Slytherin was part of Eli's backbone, and it wasn't necessary to have him killed just yet. He did all this just to send a message to his little cousin Eli and Slytherin. William had left the message in Slytherin's hideout outside the city gates. He was sure that right about now, Slytherin should have gotten the message. And he was right. Slytherin reached his hideout and was shocked silly. His men were all dead, and all their horses had magically disappeared. The funny part was that all their belongings and clothes had been stolen. There were just naked dead bodies lying around. He quickly rushed towards his room and pushed the door wide open. Everything was gone. All his gold, his silver, and a few documents that he had within his care were gone. They were really gone with the wind. Luckily, Slytherin had always kept his most important documents with him. He couldn't imagine what would happen if his enemies had gotten them. He had to admit that he had really underestimated that bastard. This was the last time that he would ever make that mistake again. There was a note on his table with a knife stabbed on it. The knife had a unique craftsmanship and had the initials G.P on its handle. Slytherin immediately knew who the culprit was. As he read the letter, his blood boiled and he couldn't help but crumble the letter in his hands. He swore that he would for sure kill the bastard, even if he had to die trying. The bastard had to die. After reading the letter, Slytherin placed it in his pocket and went outside his room. He quickly burnt down the base and took off. He had come to Sangria with 150 men, excluding the 50 that usually stayed in Sangria to keep an eye on things. All 200 men had died, with only him being the sole survivor. "The humiliation you have given me today, I will remember it." Baymard. While Slytherin was steaming away like a glazed donut, Landon had been educating the doctors, nurses, and caretakers on how to handle chickenpox patients. The children were all infected with the scourge creeper, chickenpox. Since this time was school break, the children would run around the estate playing with each other all day long. Apparently, one of the children had it, but it wasn't really visible at the time. It just looked like breakouts or bad allergies, so no one thought anything of it. Then that child spread it to the other children, who had never had chickenpox before in the estate. Since chickenpox is an airborne disease, all those children were easily infected. It was only a few days ago that the head doctor in the clinic realized what it was. In this world, since they didn't have any cure for chickenpox, all they did was let the virus go away on its own, while isolating the victims and treating them like leprosy patients. Landon walked into the room and saw the children itching and scratching themselves aggressively. That was the worst thing to do in such situations. "Woo-woo, it's itchy. Will I remain like this forever?" I feel like my throat is dry. Landon came into the room and ensured the patients that they would be fine. It wasn't easy. Some children were crying and screaming in the room, while others were violently scratching themselves against the walls. Finally, Landon decided to quiet them down with a short story. And after the story, he began briefing all the doctors on what the disease actually was, and how they could further treat and cure it. He also wanted the doctors educate the citizens and the caretakers, ensuring them that this illness was literally not a big deal. There was no reason to not visit the patients if the citizens had already gotten chickenpox when they were younger. It rarely affected those that had already gotten it. He realized that he also needed the citizens to come to the hospital within this month and register all the symptoms and diseases that they had ever gotten before. Although these illnesses had strange names in this world, they all had common symptoms to those that Landon remembered back on Earth. He wanted to know if they had gotten or survived attacks from diseases like measles, mumps, and so on. He also realized that people in this era could not differentiate between smallpox and chickenpox. For them, both were one and the same. Also, there was presently no cure for most of these diseases. That's why thousands of people died yearly within the Pino continent from them. To think that people could actually die from something like malaria, yellow fever, and typhoid. They also died from measles as well. For chickenpox to be fully cured, Landon gave the doctors a detailed description for the treatment process. The children were to soak in cold water that had sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, added to it. They were to do this at least 2 times a day. After soaking, they were to bathe with soap, so as to keep their skin clean. The caretakers and nurses were only supposed to pat and not rub their skin when giving the children their bath. They were also to keep the children hydrated by allowing them to drink lots of water and milk throughout the day. The children needed to fight off their fever and the viruses within their bodies. That's why their bodies needed hydration regularly. Heat and sweat would also make their skin itchy, so the caretakers were to wipe their bodies with wet cold rags every after 3 hours, so as to calm their skin. Since there were no pills, Landon decided to go old school. He decided to go towards the direction of Chinese medicine. He had the doctors, nurses, and some caretakers boil the leaves of the Iplomia and Ocimum basilian plant. The children were to drink the liquid from the boiled leaves at least 3 times a day. Landon had previously gotten all knowledge in farming. Part of that knowledge included identifying all plants, vegetables, dairy farming, food, and all other types of farming that existed in the world. He knew how to grow a farm filled with medical plants as well. Hence he could tell how beneficial each plant was to the human body. Landon speculated that within a week and a half, the chickenpox crises should pass for most of the children. Of course, some might require more time to completely get rid of the virus. It's been a few days since the whole chickenpox fiasco. Dr. Jerson looked at the reports from the nurses and nodded. His Highness treatment procedures had worked. When Jerson first came to Baymard, he wasn't really sure about how his life would turn out. He came in May due to the multiple attacks that were taking place in his city at the Empire of Yoden. When he boarded the ship with his family, he kept on praying that Baymard was as good as the ship owner had said. He was scared silly because he didn't want his wife, his children, his brother, and his sister's families to end up as slaves. But when he got here, he knew that all his worries were for nothing. This new king of theirs seemed to know everything. From what he gathered, their king was the one who came up with all the ideas in Baymard. At first he didn't believe it, but when their king started teaching them first aid and the medicinal importance of several plants, he was really taken aback. Their king seemed to be a super genius. He didn't know if he should call the current king of Arkadina foolish or stupid. How could he banish such a treasure? Was he sick in the head? At this point, he had given up on trying to understand royalty. For him, he really enjoyed talking with His Highness. He had observed that Landon didn't put on airs with him, and also admitted to his faults when he felt like he was wrong. Like the other day, Landon apologized for not telling them to register everyone's illness earlier on. Although it really wasn't his fault, their king felt solely responsible for the chickenpox incident. This king of theirs was weird, but they liked him. Landon had told them that they should call themselves doctors, and not healers or apothecaries. He had to admit that the word doctor had a better ring to it. Doctor. Dr. Jerson. Yup. It was way better than the other names. In this world, nurses were also called helpers, so of course Landon also changed their names to nurses. The hospital nurses always had their hair placed in a bun, or tied away with clothing while at work. Both doctors and nurses had to put on their gloves when treating injuries, as well as their clinical rubber shoes. For the doctors and nurses, Landon didn't want to bother the women around Baymard to sew lab coats, so he had given the hospital staff transparent plastic coats for them to wear at work. The coats looked exactly like transparent raincoats, and were also the same ones used by the alchemy industry while they were in the labs. The coats had buttons and 2 large pockets at the front waist region. The nurses also had to wear pants while at work. Actually, all the women in the industries also wore pants. How could they work with those long skirts and gowns that kept dragging on the floor and collecting dirt and mud? When the women moved, they usually had to gather up their gowns as they walked. Several of them had fallen down on the first day during their jobs. How could they carry anything and climb the stairs, or move at work with what they were wearing? Some women had broken some glass items already. It wasn't a big deal to break these items, but having the workers injure themselves was really frightening. Landon had removed several pieces of glass from their skin and given them first aid multiple times. That's why Landon made the rule way back in May that all women were to wear pants at work. What if they fell onto the broken glass pieces and lost an eye? There was a reason why all industries back on Earth required people to wear pants, and that was mainly for safety reasons. Even women in the hospitals wore pants. Of course, the military women as well wore pants, but for different reasons. Who could complete the obstacle courses or do rock climbing, and so on with those ridiculously long gowns or skirts. Plus, Landon was pretty sure that their underwear would show when they were doing all those military stunts. The women also found that they could do their jobs more efficiently in pants compared to skirts. They were also happy that they had stopped breaking things here and there. They were really grateful that His Highness didn't fire them from their jobs. For them, the things they broke were really expensive, but their king didn't pay any mind to it and worried about their safety instead. Hence pants was the way forward in Baymard. Each doctor and nurse also had a name tag that they had pinned to their uniforms, so that all the patients could remember their names. Right now, the caretakers that Landon had assigned around the hospital were looking after the patients, while the only doctor and 2 nurses in the main hospital were having a short but brief meeting. Nurse Chanel had just come for her shift, while Nurse Laura was about to end her own shift. The hospital was open 24 hours, so for sure, Nurse Laura would come again late at night after Chanel closed from work. Landon had told them to persevere till the end of the month, before he would assign more people to work as nurses. By that time, he would task training the new people to the present hospital staff. For now, the hospital was really understaffed. Dr. Jerson, so far we have seen a remarkable improvement with the chickenpox patients. From the tests, in the next few days 90% of them should be free to leave. Nurse Laura said, as she handed over all patient reports to him. We have also started recording all the citizens' health statuses and diseases that they had gotten before. Nurse Chanel added, actually, Dr. Jerson was really impressed with Landon's ways of thinking. Landon had placed several wooden shelves in one of the largest rooms in the hospital and called it the archives. Each shelf case had a letter carved onto it from A, B through Z. It was kind of like a filing system. Every citizen's name would be written on the corner and top of the books and placed on the shelves. The doctors and nurses would be the only ones with access to the room, hence only they would get the keys. The books would show the patient's name, place of birth, date of birth, occupation, all visits to the hospital, illnesses, doctor's prescriptions, recommendations, doctor's signature, and so on. The patients were required to buy another hospital book from the hospital. This book was the one that they could take home. This hospital book would also show them the drugs, treatment recommended by the doctor, and what they should do to relieve themselves from their illnesses. This book would also be used anywhere in any clinic within Baymard. After all the hospitals and clinics in Baymard were considered as one. Since there were no computers yet, Landon needed a way to make sure that everyone's information got recorded properly. The patient was supposed to keep the note in his hospital book when he or she gets home. and the doctors in the clinics were tasked with heading over to the main hospital and recording all the information in the patient's book stored in the archives. That way, even if the patient lost the note or his personal hospital book, the doctors can still look up his files from the archives. This was to be done, at least until computers got invented, which would be way far ahead. Even in the next few years, Landon was sure that he wouldn't be able to do it. What about Grandma Patricia? Is she getting any better? Dr. Gerson asked. Nurse Chanel took over and presented him Grandma Patricia's hospital book. Dr. Gerson quickly grazed through it and nodded as a sign of agreement to what was written in it. It looks like the swelling on her waist has gone down drastically, so His Highness was right. For now, continue all her treatments as planned. Since she has improved, I will meet His Highness to see if we should adjust anything in her treatment or diet. Grandma Patricia was one of the elderly women who came to Baymard as a refugee in June with her family. She had fallen down while farming and had rolled down a hill that was covered in stones and dirt. Elderly people have soft tissue bones, and any sort of fall could lead them to hospitalization. When she fell, she had fractured her hip bone, which led to the swelling around her waist. Her entire body felt completely alien to her at that point. The pain was truly unbearable. Her family had gotten a healer, who had advised them to keep her lying in bed all day long. She had been lying in bed for the past 3 months now. When she wanted to relieve herself or take a bath, her daughter or daughter-in-laws would help her. But that healer's advice was actually a bad move. Since then, walking had been too stressful for her as well. When injured, the elderly needed constant massages and light exercises to strengthen their bones. They needed good physical therapy. A healthy, strong body could better fight off infection and make recovery from injuries way faster than a weak one. Exercising could also delay or even prevent diseases like diabetes, cancer, strokes, and many more, just to name a few. The most important thing was that exercising could definitely improve their quality of life and life expectancy. Just lying on the bed for so long had led her to develop back pains and other body pains. Landon had given them instructions on what her diet should be like and how they were supposed to aid her through her healing process. It had been a month and a few weeks now, and there was already a massive improvement with her body and her attitude towards life. When she arrived, she acted like she wanted to die early, but now she smiled every day and also spent her time gisting away with the other seniors in the hospital. Her family was so happy seeing her walk that they started crying. They had really thought that she would live the rest of her life laying in bed. What Dr. Gerson really appreciated the most was what His Highness called a medical walker. The walker had 4 legs and was made of iron, and had rubber tubes as the shoe of the iron legs. Rubber was also placed around the side handles and acted as a soft cushion between the iron and the palms of the senior citizens. The walker really aided Grandma Patricia when she walked around the hospital during her rehabilitation exercises. As Gerson looked at the report, he couldn't help but smile. Good. You all have done a great job as nurses. Nurse Laura and Chanel were blushing at Gerson's praises as they smiled from ear to ear. They too felt that this is how a hospital should operate. Now let's go do our rounds and see how all the patients are doing. They arrived at a room with a name tag by the side of the room. The name Ward G1 was painted on the name tag and showed that this was the first ward on the ground floor of the hospital. As they walked in, the children were chatting and drawing on their pieces of paper. Some of the children's families who were not scheduled for work were also in the ward visiting their children. Now that they had been better educated and had spent time with their children, they quickly realized that the whole empire had a wrong idea about chickenpox. They even started feeling guilty towards their children for treating them like leprosy patients. Thank the ancestors that their king had been given the wisdom of the heavens to enlighten them. Once they saw the group come in, the children started smiling and waving happily. Hey, it's Dr. Gerson. Dr. Gerson. Where? Nurse Laura. Nurse Chanel. The families of the children come forward to say their thanks. Doctor, thank you for taking care of my little Bibless, my wife, and I would like to invite you to our home to convey our thanks. Nurse Laura. Thank you for doing your best. My boy tells me that because of your care, he had started getting better. Nurse Chanel. my daughter sings your praise daily and says that you have the healing hands from the heavens. Doctor, nurse, underscore. Everyone was happy as they offered their honest gratitude towards the hospital staff. Honestly, the nurses and Dr. Jerson were really happy with the recognition they were getting from the citizens. The nurses almost became emotional, but they knew right now wasn't the time to cry. They had to be strong and keep doing their jobs. For the first time since they started their profession, they felt like they were doing something right. It wasn't all about the money. They quickly realized that saving lives and treating illnesses gave them great joy and a sense of fulfillment. As they checked all the patients, the nurses took down notes of any patient who had developed any other complications or problems with the medicine given to them. Landon had told them to always do this because people could be allergic to certain drugs. Even the water from the boiled leaves could cause allergies or rashes to some people. Once they were done, they visited all the other wards with chickenpox patients and finally headed over to the other patients in the ward. They stepped into Ward G23 and saw some senior citizens and their families who came to visit them. Ah, Dr. Jerson. I was just talking about you. Nurse Laura, welcome. Child Chanel, come over to Granny. The patients welcomed the group and even teased them here and there. Child Laura, I have a grandson who isn't married. I think you would be a good match for him. That way I can have you as my granddaughter-in-law. I want Nurse Chanel as my granddaughter-in-law. Do you know, I heard that Dr. Jerson's wife is as beautiful as a flower. Of course she is beautiful. Do you think that just anyone can be with my new son, Dr. Jerson? Concerning this group of seniors, the hospital staff had already given up on them. When these seniors were together, they could really tease someone. Jerson had already been adopted without him even knowing, while the nurses were already granddaughter-in-laws to several senior citizens in the hospital. This was the everyday life of the hospital staff. Only 3 days were left before July could finally come to an end. Baymard had gone through a lot of changes throughout the month. So far, the first construction site was 80% completed, the second site is 72% completed, and the third site is 60% completed. When building, Landon utilized all his time effectively. When they were waiting for the concrete to harden, they went to the other industries and repeated the same procedures there. And with the help of 8,500 workers, the job got by quickly. Overall, Landon was happy with the overall construction progress. Within this month, the industries had also flourished and thrived on their own. All of them had accomplished their tasks for July by creating new products. And the hospital staff had also improved their skills as well. On the other hand, school would reopen on the second day of August. So Landon wanted to know how prepared the teachers were. As a king, it was necessary to have regular meetings with all parts of life in Baymard. Landon still remembered the day that he went over to the school for the end of semester results. Some children were crying so hard as they held their report card books. Their families were on the side trying to cheer them up. Others smiled and jumped around as they were truly happy to advance to the next stage. Mother Winnie, Mother Kim, and Grace were also there, as they congratulated Linda and little Momo for also advancing to the next stage. Some parents held their children's report cards and exclaimed proudly, / that's my girl. I knew you could do it. / my boy is so smart. When we get back home, I'll buy meat and those delicious spices and make you a feast. / Those who failed were really sad, but when Landon made his encouraging speech, they quickly regained their confidence. They vowed to work hard and make their parents proud in the next semester. Before, they had really never taken school all that seriously, but when they looked at the happy faces of the other students and parents, and compared it to their families' sad faces, they truly felt pain in their heart. Why didn't they try their best? Deep down, they knew that they didn't give it their all. They vowed. Next time, they would make their parents smile, like others. The results for this semester were actually pretty good. More than 70% of the students had advanced to the next class. Presently, all the teachers were now gathered and ready for their meeting with Landon. At the beginning of July, Landon had given a detailed outline of what everyone would be teaching, but today, he was here to give them their schedules for the semester. Landon quickly distributed the papers to the teachers. There were also 4 new teachers from the group that came at the beginning of July, making a total of 14 teachers in Baymard. A Chemistry 1, Mother Kim and Mother Winnie. A Math 3, 2 teachers from the group. A Math 2, Grace and 2 other teachers. A Math 1, 2 new teachers that came in July. A Pino 2, Lucy and 1 other teacher. A Pino 1, 2 new teachers that came in July. Math 3 would incorporate everything from Math 2, but would also start teaching the students about fractions and decimals. This holiday break was used by all the teachers to get familiar with their new courses. During this holiday month, Landon had been teaching his mother Kim and Winnie basic chemistry. He had even given them access to the alchemy industry during the daytime. They had learned a lot from Chief Wiggins, and had also understood how to use the periodic table and what reactions were. In Landon's mind, these women were smart. Landon didn't want them to know everything. He just wanted them to know the basics. After all, even Chief Wiggins was still learning, so how could they know everything in one go? What they knew right now was enough to teach Chemistry 1, and that was good enough. They had gone to the alchemy lab and tested out a lot of things with several chemicals and the glass beakers. They wanted to test most of the reactions in the chemistry textbook, which Landon had given them. They had done several experiments and had observed the real meaning behind the different chemical reactions. They started by writing down the equations like Chief Wiggins advised, and coming out with the products that was to be formed at the end. They almost lost their cool when they were experimenting with reversible reactions. They placed water in glass beaker and added glucose to the water. After swirling the beaker for a while, the white powdery glucose substance dissolved, as if they didn't add anything to the liquid. They then added potassium hydroxide into the beaker to act as a catalyst for the reaction. They then added a few drops of methylene blue into the beaker and swirled. At the end, the liquid in the beaker had sky blue. At this point, they paused and wrote down their observations in their little notebooks. As they wrote, they realized that the blue was vanishing and the water was becoming clearer. What sort of magic was this? They were so shocked that they nearly broke the beaker from excitement. But when they swirled that same liquid again, it turned blue. Was this what a reversible reaction looked like? They opened their chemistry textbooks and observed that these were the characteristics of reversible reactions. From then on, apart from teaching their morning holiday catch-up classes, they would go to the alchemy industry and continue their experiments. Speaking of which, they really found it cool to wear those plastic lab coats, goggles, and so on. They felt that it made them look very professional. Everyone's teaching schedule was evenly spread out throughout the semester. The schedule gave them ample time to go about their lives. They were just happy that after this coming semester, they would have 4 months of complete freedom to themselves. The next semester started in August and ended on the last day of November. From there, they would have December till March as a holiday period. And the best part of it all was that would be no makeup classes during that period. Classes would depend on the teachers. If they felt like teaching for a month during their holiday, they could do so. Of course, after the holiday, school would start in April. His Highness had said that since the winter was bad, there was no point in having the children and citizens run here and there for classes. He had also told them that after the next 1 or 2 years, he would adjust the school periods so that summer was freed for the teachers and the students. But for now, their king felt that this was the best arrangement, and they couldn't agree more with him. They all knew how bad and cold winter got. It was better to stay indoors and rest. Plus, they really didn't want to wake up early in the morning during the winter season. They didn't know how their king was going to make the place warm, but since he had promised that he would do so, they had decided to wait and see. After meeting with the teachers, Landon headed over to the military fort. So far, Baymard started increasing their military in May. Although a handful of the original citizens of Baymard were recruited in the last week of April, Landon had already decided to add them to the group of those slaves and refugees that came in May. For those who were grouped as the new recruits that came in May, this month would be the end of their first 3-month period within their ranks. Landon had said that every 3 months, they would have an exam to test their skills and knowledge on what they had learned so far. And after 6 months, there would still be another exam. Those with good combined scores for both exams would move up a rank, Landon also discussed about the details of their exams and what he wanted to see from the recruits. At the end of the day, Landon took his tired, hungry body back to the castle. It was finally time for dinner. Royal Palace, capital of Yoden. Did you find them? Queen Ivy asked. She had been looking for clues or hints about that SL*** Winnie and her bastard children. My queen, we found a clue. Apparently, they were headed on a ship that came from the Empire of Corona. A middle-aged mercenary answered as he kneeled in front of her. Good. Get your spies to head on out towards Corona. I want no errors this time. Your Highness, my young master sends his regards to you. He's currently on his way to the Empire of Terike, so he sent us here to deliver the goods that you had previously ordered. Santa's subordinate said. Today was the first day of August and once again, Santa wasn't here. Landon thought that it was very reasonable for Santa to first visit the customers that he knew way before Landon. Speaking of which, Santa had over 27 ships constantly moving about the continent of Pino. There was no doubt that all this must have cost Santa a fortune when he probably started his business. He probably began with maybe 3 ships and grew his way from there. Landon had previously heard from Santa that when he started his business, he got some of his rich clients to reward him with ships instead of money. For Santa to have done that exchange, that meant that he had taken all this into account his capital at hand. Landon really thought that he must have really had a lot of capital to pull those stunts. His workers needed to be paid, and he was not running his business on love, so how that much was his capital to exchange his goods for ships? But little did Landon know that Santa was using his father's stolen money. Santa currently owned the largest merchant organization in Corona, and also had several shops in every empire within the Pino continent. So of course he would have his ships constantly sailing all year round. Santa's absence today was totally within Landon's expectations. Santa did his business by carrying unique goods from one empire and bring it to the next. Obviously, his goods were selling like hot cakes in these empires, hence his popularity. For this month's goods, Landon had gotten all the animals and planting seeds that he had previously gotten in July. And once again, Baymard had welcomed quite a lot of people this time around. Landon settled the elderly, children, and the new military volunteers, as well as assigning people to work as caretakers. Once he was done, Landon was left with 5,400 new recruits. He sent 200 people to the hospital in the upper region, where they would undergo intensive training by all the nurses. Once they were done with their training, some of them would then be assigned to work in all the different clinics around Baymard. Landon also sent 500 people to the food industry, 500 to the alchemy industry, 1,500 to the construction industry, and kept the remaining 2,700 as construction workers at the sites. Landon gathered all the supervisors and gave them their assignments for the month. Chief Wiggins, there isn't any new product that I want your industry to focus on for now. Currently, 500 new workers have been assigned to your industry. I'll leave you the task of allocating each worker to any of the alchemy departments. No problem, Your Highness, Chief Wiggins replied. Actually, during Chief Wiggins' meeting with his supervisors, he had listened to their complaints and had also realized that some departments were really understaffed compared to the others. Now that he had 500 new workers, he would certainly try his best to settle them down. I've also made some corrections to the report that you gave me last week. If you follow it thoroughly, the problem with the alkyl group spiration should be fixed. Overall, the report you gave me was still very impressive. Well done, Landon said as he handed over a notebook to Chief Wiggins. Thank you, Your Highness. Landon took another file on his table and looked at Lior. Chief Lior, for this month, your industry also doesn't need to make any new products as well. I have also assigned 500 new workers to your industry. And like the case with the Chief Wiggins, I equally expect you to allocate them to each department within the food industry. I'm also impressed with your report and have also made a few minor corrections as well. Thank you, Your Highness, Chief Lior said as he took his report from Landon. In fact, Lior also had the same problem as Chief Wiggins. The supervisors within the food industry had also requested for more workers within their departments. Especially the farming department which Lior thought was very reasonable. Lior thought that the supervisors within the food industry were hilarious. They literally fought over the number of people who were to be assigned within the food industry. Before he had come to this meeting, each and every one of them had tried to sweet-talk him, and even went as far as offering him food. Although he took their food, he was still going to distribute the new recruits where he deemed fit. Why did he take the food then? Because he was a pure food lover. Was it the food's fault that they had tried to sweet-talk him? And no, it wasn't. Since the food was innocent, there was no reason why he should deprive himself of eating. All he told them was that he would try his best. He didn't make any promises to anyone. HMMP serves them right, who sent them to try and bribe him with food. Funny enough, all the supervisors were super tight with each other and liked to tease one another daily. But when it came to getting new recruits in their departments, they didn't mind cooking delicious meals for Chief Lior. Landon looked at Tim and smiled. Chief Tim, unlike other industries, this month I would require your industry to create a new department and produce a new product called toilet paper. I also need the porcelain and marble department to mold out sinks and toilet bowls. And finally, I will also work very closely with those electrical engineers in training to create something called a fluorescent light bulb. Tim already knew that there was no way that he would be free. Not that he minded anyway. Toilet paper was essentially made from wood, so the toilet paper department would definitely have to be as close as possible to the wood cutting department. Landon also specifically requested that most of the new recruits assigned to the construction industry should be placed in Department 6. Department 6 alone had 4 buildings assigned to it. They basically did everything, from fixing and creating industrial equipment like wheelbarrows, saws, rods, nails, and so on, to creating metal house features like lockers, locks, doorknobs, pots, pans, spoons, to creating fuel-driven heavy machines, to building any metal feature that Landon required. These people were the most active within all the entire construction industry. Department 6 had about 8 different subsectors, all sharing 4 buildings within the industry. The only sector that didn't share a building with the rest was the one that created the fuel-based heavy machines. All these buildings were 3 to 5 floors high, and all covered massive floor spaces. The first floor of each building had really high ceilings as well. When building estates in this era, nobles always tried their best to make it look as grand as those within the royal palaces. It sort of resembled the scene in Beauty and the Beast, where Belle was having a dance with the Beast. The distance from the first floor to the ceiling was that high. Landon had destroyed 2/3 of the front walls to create a massive door for these heavy machines, so that they could pass out of the building once built. Once successfully built, they would be driven and parked at the back of the estate in straight columns and rows. Anyway, since the new industries would almost be completed, Landon needed to make sure that there are enough doorknobs, door hinges, taps, and so on that were created. Department 6 also consisted of those workers who Landon had spent time teaching energy systems to. Those who learned were referred to as electrical engineers in training. These engineers in training had worked very closely with the other workers within Department 6 and created the heavy machines. They had placed and connected all the wires for the excavators, trucks, and so on. With the second construction site being the power plant, it would only make sense to start creating the bulbs in advance. So far, that was all that Landon required Department 6 to do. Landon further gave detailed instructions to Tim concerning the porcelain and marble department, on how they were to mold the sinks and toilet bowls. Once construction was completed, these fixtures needed to be connected to the pipes and placed all around the buildings. So far, there were already so many porcelain and marble floor tiles ready for installation. Hence Landon just needed them to focus on the sinks and toilet bowls for now. But Your Highness, what is this strange board thing that you want Department 13 to create? Tim asked as he looked at the notes in his hands. It's a game. It's called chess. Right now, combined with the 2,700 new recruits, Landon now had a total of 11,200 construction workers. He wanted all 2,700 recruits to start working on the sites so that they could learn from the current workers there. After settling them in, Landon withdrew 6,000 workers from the construction site for his next projects. Winter was coming, and Landon was sure that most of the medicinal plants would die from the harsh weather, if not properly cared for. These plants were used by the doctors to heal and treat their patients daily. Hence, what Baymard needed right now was a large greenhouse to continue growing these plants during the winter. With that, Landon assigned 1,000 people from the group of 6,000 to start greenhouse construction within the food industry. These workers had previously worked on the sites and had a ton of building experience. So when Landon gave them the building plan, they immediately understood every single detail on it. But what puzzled them was that this building would have no concrete floors or walls, just 4-meter-thick glass walls, as well as a glass roof. The ground of the building was to be completely exposed. What sort building was this? Who would live there? They even asked Landon several times if he was certain, and when Landon gave his approval, they found that they suddenly didn't understand their king anymore. Forget it. If their king said it was so, then it was so. And from all indications, this building was going to be a very massive single-floored one. Generally, greenhouses over 3.5 meters normally allowed warm air to rise away from the plant's leaves, ensuring that the floor temperature would remain relatively balanced. Hence, a good height allowed for good temperature control and airflow around the plants. That was why Landon decided to make his greenhouse 4 meters high. The only parts within the greenhouse that would be cemented were all footpaths and 12 other rooms used for storing manure, garden tools, and so on. Now that he had settled the greenhouse issue, Landon was left with 5,000 workers for his other project. Previously, all Landon had been doing was focusing on the construction sites. He had started making building fixtures like doors, floor tiles, and so on, just for the industries. None of these products were for the resident homes. These industries would be completed soon, so the floor tiles needed to be placed, the sinks and the light bulbs installed. Landon had planned that when the 3 sites began operating, they would only share water, electricity, and heating amongst themselves. This was to help the workers who would operate these plants have a better understanding of these new industries. During that time, he would personally train them on how to operate these industries. One doesn't just become an operating engineer without proper training. That's why Landon had already made up his mind that the month of September would be used for training these operating engineers. So now that these industries were nearing completion, he could finally begin with city planning for the entire Baymard. A while back, Landon had spent the entire 3 months, May to July, creating a detailed city plan for Baymard. He divided the city like so. Upper Region. Black Small Square District A, Royal Palace only. Black Small Square District B, Military Forces, Marine Academy, Navy and Coast Guard Academy, Air Force Academy, and Police Academy. Black Small Square District C, Main Police Station, Schools, Courts, Main Office for Baymard Bank, Education Bureau Offices, Government Policy Offices, School for Nursery, Primary, Secondary, Medical and other important schools, Firefighting Station, and so on. Black Small Square District D, Side Branches for the Baymard Bank, Luxury Hotels, Amusement Parks, Zoo, SeaWorld, Car Stores, Malls, Main Bus Station, and so on. Central Region. Black Small Square District E, Residential Region for the original citizens of Baymard. Black Small Square District F, Residential Region for the refugees and slaves. Black Small Square District G, regular hotels for visitors, bank branches, Baymard National Park, bars, stores, and so on. Black Small Square District H, closer to the entrance/exit of Baymard Police Station, Military Branch, branch office for checking and issuing identity cards, and other important outposts. A lower region. For this region, Landon didn't want to divide it up into different sectors, as only industries would be set up here. A coastal region. Landon decided to divide this region horizontally from the beach. Hence, each sector here would have its own mini-beach in front of it. Black Small Square District I, shipping dock and ports, merchant stores, and so on. Black Small Square District J, luxury beach hotels and beach entertainment. Black Small Square District K, space which Landon just wanted to keep between the other districts and District L. This space was to create ample distance between the other sectors and military posts in District L. Black Small Square District L, Baymard Marine, Coast Guard and Navy stations and posts. All these regions within Baymard would have police stations for safety, gas stations, and other important posts needed. Also, some of the districts would have bankside branches and clinics as well. After the month of May, Landon had basically allowed the construction workers to practice their driving skills and use the excavators to clear up the roads in the lower region, as well as some parts of the coastline region. The workers had used these two regions as their practice zones. How else were they to practice? Even till this day, these driving classes were still going on, and were currently taught by those who had already mastered the classes. For Landon, the workers could make mistakes in the lower region, and maybe some parts of the coastal region. But the upper and central regions were another story. Those regions needed to be superb, leaving no room for errors. After all, in future, these were the areas where guests or visitors would see the most. Currently, if one observed the lower region carefully, they would be able to see that some parts of the roads were crooked, while others were done carelessly. Landon was just grateful that they hadn't started tarring the roads yet. All that they did was clear up all grass and level the surface of the roads, in accordance with the road plan for those regions. This problem could be fixed later on, but right now, Landon didn't want to do so because he knew that they would eventually fix it themselves when the time came for tarring the roads. Presently, Landon had finally finished mapping out every road, administration building, residential house, and so on for the upper and central regions. The workers were to start with District E, which would be the region where all the original citizens of Baymard would stay. For Landon to complete the system's mission, he needed to successfully house all the original citizens of Baymard, not the slaves or the refugees. That's why he wanted to start with District E. Although the men were only to start road construction, they couldn't help but applaud His Highness when they looked at the road plan. There were more than 200 roads that were constantly intertwined with each other, just within the district alone. Landon had already given these roads either street or highway names. The roads that would be placed around every block within the residences were all single-lane roads, with ample space for side parking. For the major roads within District E, Landon had decided that they would have 2 lanes for driving. And finally, the highways that connected District E to District D upper region and District F in the central region were to have 6 lanes. 4 lanes for forward driving, and the other 2 for left and right-hand turns. Of course, he also made enough space for bicycle and pedestrian walking. And at some distance from the highway road, the train tracks would be placed there as well. Starting road construction now would definitely help the workers know where and how to place the pipes and cables for water and electricity. Once District E was done, they were to move to other districts. And after the entire central region is marked, the upper region would be next, followed by the coastal region. Landon had also completed the city building plans for Baymard, in preparation for when they were to actually start house construction. These plans included markings for luxury villas, future skyscraper resident buildings, large parking lots, and other important buildings within some district. Although he knew that some of these wouldn't be built in the next 2 to 4 years, he still liked to map them out now. Just looking at the map gave Landon a clear idea of his future goals. The sun was at its lowest and the day had finally come to an end. It was time to go home. Tomorrow, he would assist the men with road construction. 8:25 a.m. Landon had told the workers to come to the lower region earlier than usual. He wanted them to load up the tools for land mapping into the loading trucks and head out to District E. Within this week, Landon wanted all 5,000 men to learn everything about road construction. Hence, he decided to use this week as training time for the men. And although they were usually given 2 days off within a week, Landon wanted them to work all 7 days straight. Just for this time frame. Of course, they would definitely be paid extra for their overtime. After their training week, Landon would then divide them into different groups based on the different jobs within road construction. Some would be in charge of land excavation, leveling the land, digging up trenches for road water drainage, gravel adding, tarring, and so on. For now, this week would be used to familiarize the workers with every part of road construction. He also decided to start with the street roads around the residences, instead of the highways/major roads. Firstly, the main highway road in Baymard is currently used very often. The soldiers and horses use on them daily to leave from the upper region to their posts by the gates and other areas within Baymard. Carriages, wagons, and other supply trucks also use these roads to supply bags of food to the stores, military, schools, and so on. Hence, there was no point in starting with them now. Plus, highway roads were really stressful to create. There might be a possibility that Baymard would be overpopulated and filled with numerous cars in the future. Hence, Landon would also need to make highway road bridges within the city. Back on Earth, all cities had road bridges. If one wanted to head over to the mall, downtown, or any congested area, there were lanes on bridges that took one around traffic and so on. These bridges were usually supported by large pillars and were a must in lessening car accidents, aiding in traffic control, and so on. And although most of the highway roads would be on ground level, Landon couldn't deny the amount of stress highway bridges would cause him. Therefore, anything highway would definitely be done last. Once they were in the District E, Landon and the men began to offload the trucks. They had brought paint, several 2-meter-long iron rods, ropes, measuring tapes, and so on. Today, they were going to focus on mapping out the roads. The topography for the central and upper regions were really superb for construction. Both had what geography would call a plain topography. Plains were flat, sweeping landmasses that generally didn't change much in elevation. They usually occurred at the doorstep of mountains or by any coastal region. And one should know that at the back of Landon's castle in the upper region was a huge unexplored mountain range. And the coastal region was also very close to the central region. Hence, both the upper and the central regions were basically plains. These regions were like clear green football fields or clear safari fields where animals grazed openly in Africa. One could say that they looked like parks for kite flying, clear, green, and perfect for construction. The grass in these regions were only ankle level, and really less stressful compared to the lower region that was filled with rocks and trees. Of course, there were trees in these regions as well, but they spread wide apart, as opposed to a densely packed jungle. Imagine several football fields that had only 1 or 5 trees on each field. That's how these regions looked like. But having this kind of topography wasn't always a blessing. Landon realized that if he wanted to make a national park in future, he would need to plant several trees within District G. What a drag! Landon placed a 2-meter iron rod in the ground at the left side of the entrance/exit from the upper region. This rod would indicate the starting point for District E. All right. So far, all of you have your road map plan for this district in your hands. For the next 2 days, we will all map out some of the roads using this rod, and the carriage road as our reference points. Landon and the men immediately got to work. His Highness said that after 168 meters, 550 feet, we need to make roads that leave the main carriage highway and lead to the residential roads within the district. You're right. I think His Highness said that these spaces were called city blocks. So what we need to do now is mark up all the roads, as well as block areas, right? Correct. The men discussed amongst themselves as the work progressed. Generally, city blocks shouldn't be too long or too short. If it was too long, the pedestrians wouldn't feel safe, and when they were walking, they would feel like they weren't making any progress at all towards their destinations. That's why back on Earth, people didn't really approve of the block sizes of several places like Manhattan, that had a block size with length 246 feet and a width of 900 feet. The people felt like it was too long and not safe. Plus, there were really no shortcuts around the blocks. On the other hand, smaller blocks weren't always better either. Portland City in the USA was the darling of road blocks and had a block length of 200 feet as well as a width of 200 feet. That city offered short blocks and had a lot of shortcuts for those without cars. But on the downside, those with cars were constantly annoyed by these short blocks. The smaller the blocks, the more time those driving spend on traffic lights, which in turn makes them late for important engagements. Plus, on an economical point of view, as block size shrinks, more street roads would be made. Street roads cost money to maintain, as opposed to a retail-occupied land, which generated tax revenue yearly from electrical bills and so on. Hence, Landon decided to make his own blocks to be an average of the two comparisons. For the residential areas, Landon decided that the city blocks should have a length of 223 feet, 68 meters, and a width of 550 feet, 168 meters. After lunch, Landon felt like they had marked more than enough blocks along the carriage highway. So he divided the men into 3 groups. 2,000 of them were to continue marking the roads along the carriage road. Another 2,000 were to take each marked road and start marking their way across the fields and further into the district. And finally, 1,000 of them were to start marking the spaces along the already marked roads for rainwater drainage pipes, as well as water supply pipes and sewage drainage pipes. As the work progressed, Landon was happy with how much work these 5,000 men had accomplished. Landon knew that he wouldn't be here the next day, so he instructed the workers on what areas he wanted marked while he was away. Tomorrow, he needed to supervise the first official military exam for the May recruits. But for now, it was 3 p.m., and he had a date with Department C6. Time to teach the electrical engineers in training about how to make light bulbs. When Landon got to the lower region, he immediately went to the Department C2 glass and loaded a truck with already cut glass tubes and bulbs, as well as 7 oven light kilns for heating. There were several shapes presently made: large long tubes, small long tubes, short spiral tubes, and so on. Prior to this month, Landon had already known that he would make light bulbs for the new industries. Hence, he requested for the glass department to make tons of these tubes. Fluorescent lights are generally long-lasting and best for schools, industries, homes, hospitals, and so on. Although incandescent light bulbs were way more inefficient and short-lasting than fluorescent bulbs, they could still be used in residential houses. Since they wouldn't last long, it was clear to see that they would be cheaper than fluorescent bulbs. Although not by a lot, people always choose cheaper items first, even if the difference between the 2 items was by a penny. Hence, Landon still had to make these bulbs for those who wanted to value quantity over quality. One incandescent light bulb could last for only 1,500 hours, but the latter could last for more than 10,000 hours. Once Landon reached Department C6, he realized that this department needed more buildings. Department C6 alone occupied 4 buildings. But right now, Landon decided to add another building for the department, which would be designated for the creation of light bulbs. Speaking of which, Landon realized that the construction industry was quickly running out of space. Previously, there were 13 departments that already occupied 16 buildings within the construction industry. But now, he added a new department for tissue paper and a new building towards Department C6. With those out of the way, the construction industry had no more massive and used buildings left. There were just 7 wide, 1-story buildings that were previously used as sleeping quarters for the maids, slaves, and servants. Off the bat, those 7 slave buildings could only be used as storage units. So if Landon wanted more space, he would just have to construct more buildings, or create a new industry for whatever he wanted to create. Looking at the electrical engineers in training, Landon realized that he couldn't just pull them all out, as they were still needed in creating heavy machines at Building 4 of Department C6. Hence, he decided to break the men into 2 groups and alternate teaching them daily. Today, he would teach Group 1, while the other group would carry on with their usual duties, and the next day he would focus Group 2. In addition, by the end of the week, Landon would assign specific people amongst them to continue light bulb production. He just wanted to teach them all, as it was beneficial for their education as electrical engineers. Plus, some of them might even end up as repair men when maintenance is needed, so it was best for them to understand everything as much as possible. The men offloaded the tubes from the trucks gently, lest they broke, and carried them into their new building. Landon had the men set up the room as a lecture hall, and also placed all the materials in front of them. Today, we'll create long fluorescent light tubes, and the day after that, I'll show you all how to make compact fluorescent bulbs. And later on, we'll make incandescent bulbs as well. In addition, next month, I will continue on by teaching you all how to create halogen and LED light bulbs. But for this month, let's concentrate on the first 3, fluorescent tubes, fluorescent bulbs, and incandescent bulbs. Speaking of which, Landon couldn't wait to make LED lights. Those ones could last for more than 50,000 hours, and were widely used back on Earth by 80% of all the industries, schools, and so on. Those ones took time to make, hence Landon postponed them for next month. The men wore their safety wear, and they sat in the classroom quietly. Question: for electricity to work, what do we need? Immediately, several hands were raised at once. Landon smiled. For the past 3 months, every Saturday was used as lecture day. Landon would teach them for 3 hours and give them weekly assignments to complete. Yes, Christopher. A young man in his early 20s got up instantly. There needs to be a supply of electric charges, some form of push to move the charges, and a pathway to carry the charges. Correct. Everyone clapped. Usually what push system is used in electricity? Cathode-anode push system. The cathode is positively charged and the anode is negatively charged, making the electrons flow freely between 2 points. Another answered, "What are the types of current flow?" Static. Someone answered, "Good guess. But no. That is a type of electricity. What I asked for was the current flow. Who else?" A.C and DC. That's alternating and direct current flow. Correct. Now hold the larger glass tube in front of you all, and let's begin. Each person held the large glass tube in front of them and followed Landon's lead. Landon took out his own glass tube and passed white phosphor liquid through the clear transparent tube, instantly coating it white. Phosphor was a chemical that could cause the bulbs to basically glow brightly. This kind of glow could be green, pink, white, blue, and so on. After the workers had their own tubes coated, they immediately started taking notes on the importance of phosphor coating. Landon then went on to the next phase. It was time to start with the internal workings of the bulbs, specifically the electrical components. Landon took coiled tungsten wires and placed them at both ends of a smaller glass tube that was on his table. The mouth of smaller tube was heated, so as to melt to glass around the tungsten wire, hence forming a glass mold around the wire. As the lecture progressed, the men began to note the importance of other coating chemicals like barium that was used along the wire. At the end, tubes were filled with mercury, argon, and nitrogen gases, as well as other important tube components. These gases all had different uses, like argon that is useful for extending the lifespan of the light tubes. At the end of the day, Baymard had successfully created their first batch of fluorescent tubes. 8:45 a.m. The morning dew could be seen dancing on the grass, as the bright golden rays of sun shone on the fields. Within the military grounds, several men stood at attention on the fields, as they anxiously waited for the examinations to begin. The military examination was a week-long one. A Day 1, separate theory exams on military rules, weapons, safety, and Pino grammar. A Day 2, physical exam on physical combat and gun firing. A Day 3, theory on scenario questions, which were still based on war tactics, code of ethics, and military sign language. A Day 4, separate theory exams on geography, land mapping, first aid, and mathematics. A Day 5, obstacle course, push-ups, frog jumps, and so on. A Day 6, sword fighting and cannon firing. A Day 7, rock climbing. Generally, the theory exam was 50% of the final exam, and the physical was also 50%. Today was the second day for the exams, and also the only day that Landon had to supervise the examination. All physical exam marking sheets graded the recruits based on bravery, task completion, perseverance, knowledge, strength, flexibility, and so on. Mustafa was standing nervously on the exam ground with his friends. Although he was sure that he was ready, a part of him couldn't calm down. He felt butterflies all over his tummy and couldn't help but tap his boots as he waited. He looked at his friend, who in turn kept staring at the ground while being lost in thought. Everyone was nervous. Once Mustafa saw His Highness Landon, he knew that it was finally time. Landon, Lucius, the major generals, captains, and the rest of the warrant soldiers who were also supervising the exam walked towards the field. Once the recruits saw Landon, they knelt down and gave him their. "You may all rise. Today is your second examination day, and I'm sure that a lot of you are nervous, but there is no need to be. I, alongside the other soldiers, have seen you train and grow daily. Today, we will be testing your combat and gun firing skills. Both exams will go on at the same time, for the entire day. Hence, we will divide you all into groups of 2. Once you finish taking one exam, go and line up for the other. All of you have taken the first 4 written exams and can already gauge how much effort you need to put towards your next exams. Work hard, and I wish all the best. As Mustafa heard Landon speak, he became even more determined to pass today's exams. Out of the 4 theory exams yesterday, he was sure that he would pass only 3 of them. Hence, he began to feel an invisible weight on his shoulders. He had to make sure that he successfully passed the rest of his exams, and with a good grade too. Mustafa was placed in the first group, physical combat. There were 20 stages set on the fields, and more than 60 warrant officers, as well as Captain Trey, Major General Josh, and Gary, were supervising this particular exam. From what Mustafa understood, His Highness would be shuttling back and forth between both exam grounds for the entire day. Mustafa and his comrades formed 2 lines along each battle stage. As he waited, he began to observe the people fighting on all 20 stages. "Bro, you're up next after this fight. Are you ready?" his friend asked. Truth be told, his heart was pounding vigorously, and his palms became sweatier. "Bro, I'm not too sure now that I'm next. Breathe in and take your time. You'll be fine." As they finalized their conversation, they heard people clapping. The match on the stage had ended, and it was finally his turn. The rules of the battle were simple: successfully kick the other person off the stage before 7 minutes elapsed. Of course, if both participants were still on stage after that time frame, then it would be considered a tie, and both participants would get a pass grade for the exam. Mustafa rubbed his sweaty hands with powdered chalk that was placed in large bowls by stage and proceeded up. He and his opponent saluted each other, took their battle stances, and waited for the start signal. "Begin," an invigilator yelled. Instantly, both of them ran towards each other as they began their attacks. His opponent immediately slid on the floor expectantly and tripped him down.
Bang!
As he fell, his opponent quickly rolled away, stood up. Feeling the impending crisis, he too got up as well. His opponent then ran and jumped towards him, with both legs flying in the air, and aimed towards his upper chest region. His opponent was going to do a drop kick on him. To counter the attack, he quickly pushed his opponent's floating legs upwards and circled his left hand around his opponent's waist. He was going to do the backbreaker. He instantly dropped to the floor in a kneeling position and hit his opponent's back against his knees. "Ah!" his opponent cried. The fight went on, and when it was almost 7 minutes straight, he was literally rolled out of the stage by his opponent. He felt like crying. He had really lost. Just a few seconds more, and he would have qualified for a tie with his opponent. Why was he so unlucky? Although he lost, he didn't hold any grudge towards his opponent. He was actually surprised that he had held on that long with a fighting monster like that. His opponent had far superior fighting skills than he did. Hence, losing to him didn't take his dignity away as a soldier. "Hi, I'm George. Honestly, you gave me a hard time up there. I think that we are pretty much even in strength." Mustafa turned around and saw his opponent whom he had lost to. He smiled. He knew that George was just saying all this so as to cheer him up. After all, he had lost. "Nah, I think you have better battle sense and no more fighting moves than I do. Speaking of which, how come your brainbuster move is better than mine?" They chatted as they made their way towards the other examination ground. Mustafa thought that he had failed that particular exam, but what he didn't know was that most of the examiners had given him a good score. After all, completing the task was just one of the criterias. He had executed a lot of moves, as well as fought with all his might. And although his stances for most of the moves needed more work, he had definitely been able to get all the moves at least 60% right. The recruits didn't know how they were graded, so those that lost thought that they had definitely failed this particular exam. It was done this way, so that Landon and the invigilators could see the true colors of the men. Passing was important, but how you passed mattered as well. If there were people who deliberately went overboard with the fights, just so they could win, those people would fail the course whether they finished the fight or not. All the moves that the men were taught had their safety zones. When using these moves on comrades, The men were to attack the body zones that wouldn't leave any permanent or serious injury to their opponents. If anyone intentionally broke his/her comrade's spine, neck, or body parts, they would be expelled from the military ASAP. But if it was accidental, then they only get a probation period to reflect on their actions. Everything in the world was dangerous had its safety zones. Working in a chemical lab, hospital, or even driving was dangerous. But if done safely, then there would be nothing to worry about. But if someone intentionally blinded a coworker with chemicals, or gave the wrong drug prescription, or even killed someone while driving, then they had to take accountability for their actions. Even if it was a mistake, they would still be held responsible to some degree. In boxing, karate, or even wrestling, if a person broke another's jaw, spinal cord, or shattered his opponent's ribs, they might be suspended or even banned for life. Every profession had its safety zones, and the military was no exception. All the men had been taught on safety right from the get-go, so Landon wasn't going to pardon anyone. It's either expulsion or probation. But when the men were attacking enemies, TSK, they could do whatever they wanted. At that point, even if they broke their enemy's nostrils, neck, or even fingers, Landon wouldn't give two Fs about the whole scenario. That was the only time that he would allow them to run rampant. The exam progressed, and finally, it was the end of another beautiful day for Landon, and the end of another hellish examination day for the recruits. On the previous day that Landon had supervised the military exam, the construction workers had continued on marking the roads, and had also marked each residential home on the blocks. Today was dedicated towards excavating the marked roads, digging up space for rainwater drainage, water supply, central heating, and sewage pipes. If rainwater or melted snow wasn't drained, the roads and sidewalk pavements would become flooded. When that happened, the pavement grade would definitely decrease, as well as the lifespan of the pavement. The central heating pipeline, on the other hand, ensured that all buildings and houses were properly heated during the winter. It would also provide ventilation and air conditioning to all buildings within Baymard. All four pipelines, rain, sewage, clean water, and central heating, would be placed under the roads. Underneath the left lane of the road would be the sewer pipeline, as well as the water supply pipeline. And below the right lane of the road would be the rainwater drainage pipeline. As for the central heating pipeline, it would be placed underneath the center of the road. Just like how it was done back on Earth, all four pipelines were placed underneath the road and buried at different depths. In the case of a single-lane road, all pipelines would still be placed underground, but their pipe sizes would be much smaller compared to that of a 2- or even a 6-lane road. For rainwater drainage, the sidewalks along the roads would have what was usually called a catch basin. These basins would be placed periodically on both sides of the road, underneath the sidewalks. After a certain distance, a catch basin would be seen draining the water away from the roads. Their job was to gather all the water on the sides of the road and pipe it to the main pipeline directly underneath the roads. All street rainwater pipelines would lead to all highway pipelines and travel down towards the coastal region, particularly District K. At this point, Landon had realized that he needed to build a mini-estate that would focus on filtering out dirt from the water before it went to the ocean. Roadside water drains could sometimes catch cans, plastic wraps, banana peelings, oil spills from cars, coins, and so on. With all this happening, the ecosystem and marine life had to be protected. Plus, he didn't want all those bottles, plastic wraps, and cans to wash up the shores of Baymard. It was just not beach sexy. Hence, before the water went into the ocean, it needed to pass through a filtering plant. District K was a great location for the filtration plant. It was between District J, beach resorts, and District L, Navy and other armed forces. Who would like to turn up to a beach resort that had bottles and cans floating in the ocean? On the other hand, the sewage pipelines would also be directly underneath the left lane of all roads. Sewage was a tricky one. 90% of sewage systems worked with the help of gravity, meaning that the pipes had to slope downwards from their source, sinks, toilets, etc., to the wastewater treatment plant. Luckily for Baymard, the treatment plant was in the lower region. The upper region generally had a high elevation point to the central region, and the central region in turn had a slightly higher elevation point than the coastal region. But the lower region had the lowest elevation point in Baymard, which was what Landon needed. In this way, all the waste would flow downhill with ease. Gravity was needed because wastewater generally had a lot of solids in it, which made pumping a pain in the butt. There was tissue paper, bones from the sink, seeds from fruits that would end up in the pipes, making it very hard to pump. But although pumping was stressful for sewage, it was still very much possible. If there were areas that needed poop to travel over hills, grinded pumps or lift stations would be used to pressurize the poop. The lift stations literally pushed the sewage up the hills to a needed height where they could gravity flow downwards again. So in the ideal situation, pipes from each house would connect to a main sewer pipe underneath the road and flow downhill by gravity. And now that the men had marked out each residential unit around the blocks, they now knew how many residential sewage pipelines would branch out from the main sewage pipeline underneath the road. There would also be manholes placed periodically along the pipes. These manholes would act as access points, should in case a problem arises in the sewer pipeline. For example, if a toddler had a bad habit of frequently flushing down his toys in the toilet, there might be a clog over time with the sewer pipelines. When that happened, the workers would have to use these manholes and unclog the area. And aside from sewers, rainwater pipelines would also have manholes as well. Once Landon and the men arrived at the road site, they immediately got on the heavy machines and began work. When they had their driving classes months ago, they had been thoroughly taught how to install all these piping units, and had also done so when they were constructing the other 3 industrial sites. With months of experience under their belt, they immediately knew what to do when they looked at the piping plan. And for the next 3 days, some people used excavators to dig up the ground. Others placed the pipes with the help of draglines and other heavy machines. Some leveled the ground with bulldozers, while others compacted the ground with compactors, rollers. And since there were not enough machines for 5,000 people, those that weren't driving either jumped down into the trench and guided those who were on the machines placing the pipes, screwed the pipes together, continued marking the land, and so on. At the end of the day, there was a job for everyone on site. On the 6th and 7th day of the week, they completely tarred the roads using the pavers, spreaders, and other heavy machines. Finally, they were done. Well, almost done. Although training week was over, Landon still added 2 more days for teaching. The tar on the road would only take a day at most to dry, so while it was drying, the men did the sidewalks. And once it was finally dried, road-marking heavy machines were used to paint the roads. The white painted lines usually differentiated each lane, bicycle paths, traffic lines, pedestrian crossing lines, and so on. When everything was done, Landon could finally close his lessons on road construction. Of course, he had made up his mind that at least 2 days a week, he would come over to assist them, as well as check up on their work. Before Landon left, he divided the men into 2 main groups. The first group would continue working on the residential roads within District E, while Group 2 would start installing the main highway pipelines and connecting them to the coastal or lower regions. Unlike the others, the main highway pipelines were not going to be placed beneath any highway road. They would be placed at the sides, hence the men didn't need to necessarily touch the roads. They just had to place the pipes alongside all highway roads and connect them to the coastal region, or the plants in the lower region, depending on what pipeline it was. On the city plan, there were 3 main highway roads within the district. 2 had 3 lanes, while the last one had 6 lanes. Landon needed the men to start working on those pipelines now. At the end of the day, even if house or road construction within the district was done, if these pipelines weren't connected to the coastal or lower regions yet, then nothing would be supplied or drained. No clean water, no heating, no sewage drainage, no rainwater drainage. Nothing. Landon really wanted to get things done before it started snowing. In Baymard, snow usually started in the early days of December, and sometimes in the later days of November. Landon's plan was to get the original Baymard citizens all housed up before then. And at that time, all these features needed to be fully installed and working within in their homes. Right now, Landon really wanted to finish this housing mission, but he also knew that Baymard's housing plans couldn't be rushed either. For the system's mission to be completed, he needed to successfully house all the original citizens of Baymard. Sigh. Long story short, time was money, and he needed the citizens to be safe for the winter. Hence, those pipelines needed to be installed ASAP. While Landon jumped from one industry to the other, the royals and nobles in the capital were perplexed over the lateness of one particular noble. Everyone just had one question in mind. Where the hell was City Lord Shannon? Royal Palace, capital of Arcadina. Over the past week, all those involved with the border war had finally arrived at the capital. All except one. Everyone was puzzled about what could have delayed the mighty war god. King Barn, his 3 sons, some court ministers, and the city lords that would participate in the upcoming border war were gathered around the throne room. In 4 more days, all the men would be heading out towards the border cities that had been conquered by the Diaphorus Knights. There were currently 5 groups dedicated for taking back each border city, and each group had 1 commander and 3 generals for the war. In some groups, the princes would act as commanders and have the other city lords within their group act as generals. And in others, a city lord was appointed to act as commander. The men had positive attitudes towards this war. They felt that they were more in number compared to their enemies. With each man having at least 5,000 knights under his command, victory was definitely assured. All through the day, they had been going over their battle plans and strategy. And now that their meeting was coming to an end, something had to be said about City Lord Shannon. "You're sure that you had previously sent out my orders?" "My king, I am most certain. Perhaps something happened along the way that caused his delay." "My king, we can't continue to wait for him any further." "He's right, my king. Our cities are being stolen by those animals." "My king, may I suggest that we replace City Lord Shannon with someone else who's currently residing within the capital?" Alec Barn fell silent for a while. The whole charade made him feel uncomfortable. Whenever there was an important battle taking place, it was usually Shannon who arrived earlier than others. This was really puzzling. Why hadn't he shown up yet? As City Lord Shannon was popularly known within the capital, many young knights looked up to him for his strength. They had heard of his amazing battle skills and the amazing wars that he had fought alongside King Barn back in the days. Although the people in the capital feared King Barn, they had loads of respect for City Lord Shannon. In their mind, he should have been their king instead of Alec. Actually, the people were simple-minded and would generally prefer anyone who was kinder to them and better than Alec Barn. In addition, because of the way the people thought of Shannon, Shannon himself had been planning to dethrone Alec ages ago. That was until he died at Landon's hands. He had planned the whole scenario with his eldest son Martyr. Martyr was to get close to the royal princesses, as well as gradually gain the support of the people. He himself was to gather his forces slowly, and even by some of the knights in the royal castle. He had planned to make a deal with Alec's personal guards, who in turn were to poison or aid him in killing Alec. Everything was going as planned, up until he met Landon. He had ended up dying at the hands of his enemy's bastard son. And as he died, he couldn't help but feel resentful. Couldn't he have at least died at the hands of Alec, the crown prince, or someone important? As a person of great status, wasn't it a stain to his name if people heard that he was defeated by sickly bastard? People went down in history as war heroes, but no. He just had to end up being a stepping stone for the bastard. Alec Barn had always known of the people's thoughts about Shannon. Ever since they were still knights training at the Knight Academy, Shannon had always had a better image in the capital compared to him. Shannon was very charismatic, gentle, and kind to all the ladies and nobles around. The stupid people in the capital actually believed that bullshit acting of his. Alec didn't blame Shannon at all for his acting. Power play was indeed about keeping up appearances. In this day and age, those who acted like White Lotus, heroes, and so on, easily won the hearts of the people. The people were sheep that needed a shepherd to guide them. They only listened and obeyed. And if anyone could convince them, then they could even give up their lives for that particular shepherd. Truly a stupid bunch. Alec himself used to pretend while he was in the academy, but after he killed his family, who would stand in his way again? He had become king and was the lawmaker. Who did he need to keep on airs with? Alec knew that Shannon wasn't as pure as he would like the people in the capital to believe. In the western regions, Shannon was known as Blood Knight. Over there, the people were completely frightened by Shannon. He acted like a bandit and did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted to. He killed sometimes for fun and tortured innocent people when things didn't go his way. This was a man who had reportedly killed 3 of his wives once. He had burned villages down, just because he missed the sight of blood or whenever he was enraged. Shannon also had one of the largest harems in the entire empire. He had kidnapped and raped countless women ever since he became city lord. Some of these women were stolen from their husbands and families. The sad part of it all was that some had their husbands and children burnt or buried alive, since Shannon didn't want his new wives to miss their old families. The thought of another man having anything to do with his wives completely irked him. Hence he went after their families, towns, or villages. When Alec was king, he immediately shipped Shannon out to the western regions, which had the worst conditions within the empire. He also stationed several nobles around the western region to monitor Shannon's movements. If Shannon was seen making his way to the capital, secret messengers would be sent to deliver messages to Alec. But after 15 years, nothing had happened. Hence Alec dropped his guard down. But for some reason over the recent years, he had been getting overly suspicious of Shannon. Shannon would now frequently make trips to the capital, and would also do things that garnered support from the peasants. He had decided to use this war as an opportunity to kill Shannon. The other city lords within Shannon's team were supposed to team up and kill him after they had won the border war. But now Shannon hadn't showed up yet. Did he know of their plans way beforehand? Was he planning a revolt? Alec's mind was racing back and forth. It was indeed the perfect time to revolt. The princes were all leaving, and most of his strongest city lords would join them as well. Did Shannon build up his forces in secret? And if so, how many men did he really have under his command? Although there were still barons and ministers in the capital who had their own armies, how could Alec be sure that they wouldn't stab him in the back as well? None of them really cared for him, and would even be pleased if he actually died. Plus, even with his personal army, he couldn't guarantee his win, since he didn't know how many men his enemy had. For the first time in his life, he began to regret his decision of ruling the people with fear. Shannon, oh Shannon, he. Are you really going to bite the hand that fed you? Alec raised his right hand up in the air, and the room became silent. They had been talking and arguing about who would be the new commander for Shannon's team. Since City Lord Shannon isn't here right now, City Lord Campbell will take over his position as commander. Also, Baron Unicy within the capital will join the group, so as to even out the members between each group. Alec then turned to 2 of the guards at his side and issued out a command. Get Shannon's son, Martyr, to see me at once. The day for the first official Master Chef competition had finally come. So far, only 8 cooks had applied to participate in the competition. In preparation for today, Landon had requested for the furniture-making department to make several large wooden bleachers for the citizens to sit on. The competition was taking place on the fields located just beside Landon's castle in the upper region. The area was arranged like how basketball matches were set up back on Earth. The bleachers were positioned around a large empty space, which would be used by the contestants for cooking. As for the judges, their seats were closest to the contestants. One could imagine them being seated where basketball hoops were usually placed on a basketball court. The seats would be raised high up, so as to enable them to see everything in front of them. This was also beneficial for the citizens, as they would also be able to see the judges, as well as their reactions and facial expressions when they ate and judged. Landon also got wooden scoreboards that looked like table tennis rackets, and had numbers painted red on each and every one of them. If a judge scored somebody a 5 out of 10, then the judge would simply hold up the racket with the number 5 on it. From there, the person who was in charge of hosting the show would tell the audience the score. Hence those who were seated far at the back could know the scores as well. Today was Saturday, the children were out of school, and those that weren't working came to watch the show with their kids. The rules of the competition were simple. The chefs had 30 minutes for preparation time, where they would lay out and prepare all their ingredients for the competition. This prep time would be done before the competition officially began. The competition had 1 hour of cooking time, where they were to make an appetizer, entree, and a dessert. Serving the citizens would also be done in 2 hours' time. And each chef's workstation would be given 3 large kiln ovens, 3 working tables, 7 large pots, 5 large frying pans, knives, cooking spoons, wooden chopping boards, 4 large iron cook stands, and 4 large steel griddles. Since there were no gas cookers invented yet, hence Landon had come up with steel griddles and iron cook stands. Back on Earth, these inventions were popularly used by people who didn't live on electricity, and even at barbecues or hunting trips sometimes. Steel griddles looked like large metal cupboards that had a single chimney pipe at one end of the cupboard. With these griddles, wood would be placed inside the cupboard area and lit. Once the wood started burning, the cupboard doors would be locked and the smoke inside the cupboard would go out of a 1-meter tall chimney pipe. At the top of the 1-meter chimney pipe was another half-meter pipe that extended sideways. This was done so that if one placed this griddle inside a home, his sideways pipe could extend outside a window and send the smoke within the cupboard space outside the home. And as the wood burned within the steel cupboard, the upper outer surface of the cupboard would heat up gradually. This surface would basically be used as a frying pan. Eggs could be fried on the hot surface. Even about 20 meat buns for burgers could be placed and cooked on the top surface. Since the material used is stainless steel, the food would not carry any metallic tastes. And just so people didn't accidentally burn their bodies, Landon had made the upper part of the cupboard to be very large when compared to the lower part that had the firewood placed in it. If one really wanted to imagine it, Landon would best describe the situation as that of a fancy glass table that had one leg at its center. The rectangular or circular table top would be used as a cooking surface, while the only table leg at the center would be used as the compartment for burning firewood. The chimney part could be visualized as a 1-meter stick being placed at the side of the tabletop. With this setup, the large tabletop would definitely give the chefs some distance between the firewood chamber and themselves. Again, these griddles could only be used for frying and needed no frying pan for cooking. As for the iron cook stands, although they were very similar to the griddles in appearance, their upper surfaces had several holes on them. These holes ensured that the cooking pots had direct contact with the fire within the chamber below. This iron cook stand could be used for everything boiling, frying with frying pan, and so on. They literally served as a gas cookers, except instead of gas, wood was used. These cook stands could take up to 6 medium-sized pots at once. And if the pots were larger in size, then they could just be placed over 2 holes on the cooker. Within Baymard, both of these inventions were already widely used, as they were better than what the people were used to. With these inventions, the people could now cook without constant exposure to fire. Previously, they made all their meals outside or under a grass hut that didn't have any walls. And even when they cooked indoors, the rooms would be full of smoke, and there was always constant fear of their homes being burnt down from the open indoor fires. But now, they could cook inside their homes without the fear of the fire spreading around. The cupboard idea was really genius to them, as the long and bent chimney pipe at the top literally took the smoke out their windows. It really changed cooking for them. For the competition, once the contestants were done cooking, they would be judged and later scored. For the first part of the competition, the judges would score them based on several factors. These scores only make 60% of their total marks. The other 40% would come from the audience. After the judges gave out their reviews, the citizens would come down from the bleachers and taste of all the dishes. At that time, 20 sous chefs would assist each candidate in serving the citizens. Sous chefs were basically second-in-command chefs, who were to listen and follow the instructions of each contestant, so as make numerous dishes for the audience. For the second part of the competition, these sous chefs would follow strict rules when working under the contestants. They were not supposed to convince the audience to eat the food or show favoritism towards any body. They just had to assist the contestants make several dishes for the audience. At the end, the chef with the most dirty or used plastic plates would have the highest score. The plastic plates for each chef would be distinguished by color: red, green, yellow, and so on. So if there were more dirty green dishes at the end, then the contestant who had served his meals on those dishes would win. The citizens had gathered, the chefs were ready, the judges were seated, and it was time to get the show on the road. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Baymard's first MasterChef competition. Dominic was in charge of hosting today's competition. For over a week now, he had been practicing and rehearsing his manner of speech for the competition. His Highness Landon had written down a script for him and had also assisted him during rehearsals. The crowd clapped enthusiastically as they listened to him. He even cracked a few jokes here and there to make them happy and relaxed. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our judges for today's competition. Our first judge is someone that most of you have heard of. He is the overseer of the food industry and the one responsible for producing all the amazing ingredients that exist in Baymard. He is the famous, the one and only Chief Lior. The people continued clapping eagerly amongst themselves. Who didn't know Chief Lior? In fact, all the overseers in Baymard were very popular and well known amongst the people. They were seen like celebrities. Right now, in the eyes of the people, all the overseers were seen like how Bill Gates was viewed back on Earth. They earned the biggest paycheck, made some of the biggest moves and decisions within the industries. Plus, they were quiet, humble, and took their jobs very seriously. Every time someone would talk about any of the industries, the names of the overseers would sometimes slip into the conversation as well. Back on Earth, people would say phrases like, "Do you think that I'm as rich as Bill Gates to afford a Ferrari?" But in Baymard, they would say, "Do you think that I'm as rich as Chief Lior to buy several bags of food at once?" It was usually sentences like that. Of course, Chief Tim and Chief Wiggins were also made reference to every time people wanted to buy excess goods from their industries. Chief Lior waved and smiled at the crowd as they cheered. This feeling is good, he thought. Up next, we have the two most famous chefs within Baymard seating here today. Over the past month, their cooking skills and dishes have become popular with everyone, and have even earned them His Highness approval. They are Chef Blake and Chef Benita. Once again, the people clapped enthusiastically and discussed amongst themselves. Those who had eaten their meals could vouch for its tastiness. It was as if these chefs were born to cook. Some people even went back home to try and recreate the dishes from these chefs, but it was all for naught. Even when they got the exact recipe, they still couldn't get their meals to taste the same as Blake and Benita. These chefs were, as His Highness had said, 3-star chefs. Landon didn't want to give them higher stars because for now, Baymard didn't have enough ingredients for him to gauge their true potentials. Ordinary people were usually 1-star chefs or no star at all. But these chefs had talent. Just by tasting anything, they could tell Landon all the ingredients that was used to cook the meal. They could also properly estimate and create their own way of cooking different dishes. Plus, their taste buds were more alive than most people. As these chefs waved, the people cheered for them as well. Lastly, he is our beloved king and Baymard's personal savior, as well as the creator for all the delicious food recipes that you all have eaten over the past month. Today, he will be acting as a guest judge for the competition. He is Highness Landon Barn. Landon, who was seated at the center of the judges' panel, waved his hand Queen Elizabeth style. Oh my heavens! He just waved at me. No. It was at my daughter. I wonder whose food Chief Lior would like the most? I heard that he himself is a foodie. Chef Blake and Benita are the ones that I really want to look out for. They would not spare these contestants if the food isn't up to their standards. Remember, His Highness had said that they both had godly tongues. I can't wait to see whose dish would please His Highness Landon. If I had known that His Highness was going to be a judge, then I would have personally applied. Just imagine if I had my food eaten by the king. Underfer. Everyone discussed amongst themselves as they listened to Dominic. For the competition, the judges would give points for a appearance/plate presentation, maximum points of 4. A execution, max points anyone can get is 10. A texture, max points of 5. A creativity, max points of 5. A taste, max points of 10. The contestants were also expected to make full-course meals that consisted of an appetizer, entree, and a dessert. Most importantly, the theme for their dishes was adventure. And for the prizes, a 1SD place got 1.5 months of cooking lessons with Chef Blake and 250 silver coins, 25,000 copper coins or 2.5 gold coins. A 2 ND place, 1 month of cooking lessons with Chef Benita, and 180 silver coins, 18,000 copper coins or 1.8 gold coin. A 3 RD place, 2 weeks of cooking lessons with Chef Benita, as well as 100 silver coins, 10,000 copper coins or 1 gold coin. Asterisk 100 copper coins equals 1 silver coin. 100 silver coins equals 1 gold coin asterisk asterisk. Since the citizens usually made a minimum of 650 copper coins a month, the reward money for the competition was really jaw-dropping. In the Empire of Arcadina, the minimum wage was 350 copper coins. Landon had first made Baymard's minimum wage to be 450 copper coins, but when he later accessed all the dangerous things that these people did daily, that money was just too little in his eyes. Hence he decided to raise the minimum wage to 650 copper coins. The knights also had their salaries raised to 750 copper coins per month. Well, the overseers and supervisors obviously made more money, as well as the upper military ranks, head chefs and doctors. Firstly, Baymard was a self-sufficient city. The resources like ores were all found within the territory, and Landon made a ton of money monthly from Santa. So Baymard could actually afford to raise the wages for the workers. Of course, every month, Landon had taken out a certain percentage from each person's salary that would be used for healthcare insurance and taxes. Last month, immediately after the whole chickenpox fiasco, Landon had told the people about the benefits of healthcare, and had also told them how their taxes would be reduced from now on. Since the taxes weren't high and their salaries were increased, the people immediately accepted Landon's methods. Who wouldn't? Even when the tax and healthcare was reduced, their salaries were still higher than what they had been paid previously. Landon had adopted the method done back on Earth. Everything one wanted to buy had tax on it, and even their salaries would be tax-reduced well. That tax would be used for future development and so on. To make it easier for the people, Landon had written several sheets of paper that explained how much would be deducted and also put out different formulas for each reduction. Landon had planned that once printers came out, he would officially address all policies and government-related issues then. He needed to print them identity cards, law books that had all policies printed onto them, and so on. In fact, nothing could really be done without printers. Even dictionaries for schools needed printing services. Sigh. The people here also got paid bi-weekly, so as to encourage them to work harder. But still, even with the raise in their salaries, the prize money for today's competition still had them shook. Back on Earth, it was the same feeling as someone who had just seen $10,000 or even $20,000 as prize money. It really excited the audience. Plus, who wouldn't want to receive skills from famous people? Those who were on their journey to being chefs really wanted to punch themselves in the face. Why hadn't they applied for the competition previously? This was a chance to learn Chef Benita and Chef Blake's godly cooking arts. Yet they had just let such a golden opportunity slip by. They had invisible tears in their eyes as they looked towards the stage. Once the judges and contestants had been introduced, Landon had a short, brief speech and the competition resumed. Cooking time. The competition had already begun, and everyone tensed up as they watched the contestants hurriedly cook. As time passed by, the audience continued to discuss and observe the competitors. Heavens, look at those knife-cutting skills. Senior Vigera is amazing. Just looking at Senior Winston cook makes me hungry. What kind of smell is this? Why is it so fragrant? Looking at them cook has made me realize how far back my cooking skills are. Look, she's already placing her dessert in the kiln. Senior Yorick is extremely fast and well. Just look at the way he's beating the eggs. Dominic saw the signal from Landon and knew that it was finally time to stop the contestants. Time for the judges to give their reviews. Up first was contestant Milton. He placed his dishes on a metal-wheeled trolley and brought them closer to the judges. Once he had placed all the dishes on their table, he immediately stood a little distance in front of them and waited nervously for their comments. The judges had their own metal megaphones, so they began their assessments. Before we the judges eat, let's talk about your plate presentation and appearance. The theme of the meal was adventure, and your dish screams hunting in the forest. Am I correct? Chef Benita asked. The place was dead silent. Yes. The audience held their breaths as they listened to the judges. So far so good, they thought. The judges on the panel smiled. And what would you call this dish? Landon asked. A hunter's victory, Milton said anxiously. It certainly does look like forest. The rice was sculpted like a mountain and placed at the uppermost corner of the plate. I can also see that you added a yellow-colored sauce around the mountain's top as well. Landon said. Around your mountain of rice, you mixed that same sauce with your meat and placed at the doorstep of the mountain. I'm guessing that this signifies the ground itself. Chief Lior commented. Your leafy vegetables were then placed between each meat stack, creating the illusion of trees. Chef Blake said. And finally, you rolled your brown fried eggs, cut them into several pieces, and stationed them at different points on your plate, which made them seem like large rocks or logs of wood placed around the forest. Chef Benita added as she used her fork to poke the eggs. And for your dessert, I see that you also neatly placed star-shaped cakes on a different plate, which probably signifies the stars at night. So your adventure happens at night time. Interesting, Landon said. And finally for your appetizer, I'm guessing the fish sticks in the sauce signified a water body and life somewhere in your forest, Chief Lior concluded. Everyone in the audience couldn't help but give 2 thumbs up to Milton. He had done so much preparation and showed off his skills as a chef. He was telling his own adventure story through his cooking. Now it was time for the judges to eat the meal. As the judges ate, they all had different looks on their faces. The audience couldn't help themselves from guessing what the final outcome would be. Do you think Chef Blake is impressed? Look, Chef Benita is still continuing to eat the fish sticks. The judges looked at each other and finally decided to give their review. The audience quieted down and the air was filled with anxiety. The people felt like they couldn't breathe. For your meat, you cut them up into rectangular pieces, spiced them up, covered the outer surfaces with flour and eggs, and later fried them, making the exterior of the meat crispy and the interior juicy and tender. It has great taste. Chef Benita said. Meat could be cooked this way, the people thought. The people eased up when they heard the review. The other judges went on to give their own comments as well. I can tell that the sauce that you made was made of milk, butter, salt, eggs, and pepper. The butter was heated up and mixed into the milk to make heavy cream. Then you added all the other ingredients, as well as curry to make the sauce look yellowish. Your vegetable pieces were fried and coated with spices, which also made them firm and crispy, and your cakes were soft and sweet as well. As the judges kept giving positive reviews, everyone thought that Milton had done a marvelous job. But the next comments made them realize that life was really too unpredictable. Separately, your dessert, entree, and appetizers were fantastic. They were really great. But together, they were utter trash. Chef Blake commented. Everyone gasped for air as they heard what was said. What was this situation? Did they just hear it right? How brutal. But also somehow entertaining to watch. Milton, on the other hand, felt like someone had poured cold water on him. When I ate your appetizer, entree, and dessert together, I felt like I was at the jungle losing a fight against a wild boar. Chief Lior said. I agree. It feels like I'm being torn into shreds by dangerous animals. Landon added. Your meal's name is a hunter's victory day, but it feels like a hunter's death day. Chef Benita stated. The other contestants couldn't help but sweat as they looked at their own dishes in front of them. They had completely lost their confidence as they listened to the judges. Was it possible for them to have a do-over? The peppery taste on your food clashes with your overly sweet cakes. The combination is just awful. Also, the milk you had us drink as a beverage didn't enhance the taste of your dish at all. Instead, drastically destroyed it. After the judges had pinpointed all his errors, they ended their remarks with encouragement. But I must say, you've got what it takes to be a master chef. All you need is more time, experience, and practice. Never give up. Nothing in life comes easy. Take all the criticisms we give you today, work on your skills, and make us proud. Contestant Milton, I await the day that you cook alongside me as a 3-star chef. Tears flowed from Milton's eyes as he heard the last comments. Thank you. The audience got emotional as well. We believe in you, Senior Milton. Never give up. That's right. All you need is time and experience. You're way better than me in cooking, Senior Milton. Milton truly felt touched as he listened to the crowd. The competition went on with the audience hanging on a tiny thread of life again. Their emotions were all over the place because of the judges. Once the judges were done with their assessment, they awarded points to all the contestants. For this part of the competition, Yorick came first, Vigera was second, and Milton was third. Of course, there were 5 other contestants behind Milton as well. Now it was time for stage 2 of the contest. The audience quickly came down to eat their fill, as they themselves were hungry from watching all these juicy meals being prepared. With 20 sous chefs helping each contestant, the dishes were served very fast to the citizens. And finally, by the end of the competition, the plates were gathered and counted. Surprisingly, every contestant still had the same rank as before, which meant that the audience still found Yorick's food to be the tastiest, followed by Vigera and then Milton. Of course, Landon gave a closing speech for the event and awarded the winners with their rewards. With this, the competition had come to an end. Daddy, you won. Daddy, congratulations. Milton turned around and looked at his wife, his 9-year-old son, and his 6-year-old daughter running towards him. They immediately hugged him as they felt immensely proud of him. I can't believe that Chef Benita would be teaching you for 2 weeks. Ha ha ha. I'm so happy. Wah. Look at all the money in the bag. His wife jumped about happily. Milton smiled as he looked at his family. Today had truly shown him that his road to being a chef wasn't going to be easy, but there was no way in hell that he would give up without a fight. Just as the judges had said, he needed to properly hone his skills in order to advance in the culinary world. He needed to do this for his family and for his future. He had already swore that he would do his best and get Chef Blake and Benita's recognition. His new dream was not to be a 3-star chef like them, but to be a 5-star one. Nihud Academy, capital of Arcadina. A young gentleman sat on a chair in his dorm room, with his personal guard standing beside him. Suddenly, his window opened and someone in a cloak jumped in. Any news? No, young master. Keep searching. Yes, young master. And just like that, the cloaked person had left as quickly as he had arrived. Martyr Shannon's personal guard was worried as well. Young Master Martyr, what do we do about Lord Shannon's disappearance? Lord Shannon's estate, capital of Arcadina. Young Master, all preparations are complete, said one of Martyr's subordinates. Good. Martyr was presently in his father's estate in the capital. Although he mostly slept in the academy dormitory, when important matters arose, he would come to his father's estate to handle them. Martyr was sure that the walls of the academy had ears, hence it wasn't safe to talk about his plans at school. A few days back, he had met with King Barn at the royal palace. From the looks of it, King Barn was also probing him to see if he knew anything about his father's whereabouts. But since he was innocent on the matter, standing his ground was a lot easier to do. King Barn thought that either Martyr truly didn't know where his father was, or he was a really good actor. The king couldn't find any loophole in his story, or any strange behavior from him. Hence King Barn had decided to send Martyr down to Riverdale City, with 4 captains from his personal army. The knight captains were to stay in Riverdale for 2 months, before returning back to the capital. If they didn't return, then King Barn would assume and prepare for a full-scale war against Shannon. The feeling of having an enemy, who might be secretly planning an attack, had really made him feel on edge lately. Hence he decided Martyr was to leave at the end of August for Riverdale, along with his captains, or should he say spies. Martyr, on the other hand, was really concerned about his father's whereabouts. He knew more than anyone else that his father didn't plan any sudden attacks yet. Plus, his father had written him a letter a while ago, stating that he would be coming to the capital. Martyr also knew that if there was really something big happening, his father would definitely not write it down on paper, for fear that someone might intercept the letter. If Martyr wasn't in the capital, then his father would definitely send letters of that nature to him. But since he was in King Barn's region, anything could happen. It was better to be safe than sorry. But what was so big that his father didn't even show for his mission in the capital? Martyr was at his wits' end with the matter. Although people in the West called his father a tyrant and a villain, he truthfully loved the old man. He believed that was how a future king should live. Ever since he was little, he had been doing the same things that his father did. When his father went to torture, burn, or capture people, he was there as well. He had his first taste of a woman, or should he say a girl, at age 11. He had chained her hands and legs to his bed, and kept her in his room every time he made love to her. After the session, she would be taken to the slave chambers or healers for treatment. Too bad that just after 9 love-making sessions, the 8-year-old died on his bed. He didn't feel any emotions or remorse towards her. He tossed her body down his bed and took another girl from the dungeons. Those children were captured by his father and only knew poverty. So shouldn't they be happy that he had at least given them the opportunity to grace his bed? Who was he? He was Martyr Shannon, future Prince of Arkadina. He was the third and favorite son of his old man. When he was 12, he had heard that King Barn had killed his older brothers while they were sent to war some time back. At the time City Lord Shannon was 15, he became City Lord. And since then, he had been raping women here and there. Hence, before Martyr was born, Shannon already had 2 sons and 7 daughters. Shannon didn't care for his daughters, so he married them off to wealthy nobles in the capital. How they would be treated didn't matter to him. What good could come out of women? When Shannon had Martyr, he realized that he didn't want any more children. So he started giving all the women in his harem drugs that would damage their wombs permanently. With the death of his first 2 sons, Shannon realized that he needed to teach Martyr everything about power struggles, so that he didn't end up like his brothers. Hence, from the age of 5, Martyr began his lessons with Shannon. They planned and strategized on how to make the villain, King Barn, pay for killing their blood. Because of their closeness, Martyr held his father in high regard and knew every step that his father took. That was why his father's disappearance was strange to him. He personally didn't believe that King Barn was innocent on the matter. Was King Barn really sending people with him to Riverdale just to check the situation? What if King Barn had already hired mercenaries to deal with his father, and then pretended like he wasn't aware of his father's disappearance? Or was it City Lord Kane of Hawk City that attacked his father? City Lord Kane and his father had been at a power struggle within the Western Territories for years now. His father's army was large in number, so he knew that the enemy would either be a noble with a powerful backer or King Barn. There were so many reasons why King Alec Barn looked suspicious in his eyes. If he left the capital, wouldn't it be easier for King Barn to kill him? Or maybe King Barn just wanted to lure him into a false sense of security before making his move. Either way, he didn't trust City Lord Kane. And he sure as hell didn't trust that snake, King Barn. That was why he began to make preparations for the journey to Riverdale City. Whatever the enemy's plans were, Martyr was sure that he would be fully prepared. He was just praying that the uneasiness he felt towards his father's whereabouts was all for naught. Otherwise, he didn't even want to imagine what he would do to the poor soul who dared to touch his father. While Martyr was busy making preparations, royal families all over the Pino continent were becoming more and more unstable due to the whirl of change that took place in June. Royal Palace, capital of Yoden. King MacLaine looked at his daughters, whom for the first time ever had requested for an audience with him. In fact, at this point, they were demanding for an audience with him. Ever since the news that Corona had gotten themselves a female ruler spread throughout the empire, all the women had become crazy overnight. They now demanded equal pay as men, and also wanted to get similar jobs to that of men. They had also formed cliques around each of King MacLaine's daughters, and demanded for women to choose when to pleasure their husbands. It had even gotten to the point where it couldn't be ignored anymore. These women requested to participate in court meetings, and also requested that men should do some household chores daily. Of course, the men were strongly against the idea. They had been firmly rejecting it, and even said that they would never go to war with a woman by their sides. At the end, every man agreed to keep their wives and daughters on a leash. For now, their plan was working. But MacLaine knew that down the line, these plans would crumble down and fall. Hence, he decided to give in to one of their demands. He had allowed them to do daily jobs for men, excluding knighthood. But no. Apparently, this wasn't enough for these bloody blood-sucking demons. They wanted everything. McLean had already made up his mind that he wouldn't entertain them anymore. Let them do their worst. And now out of nowhere, all 11 his daughters had joined in and demanded for an audience with him. He looked at his daughters from the youngest, 6 years old, to the oldest, 19 years old. He didn't even know February 3rds of them personally, yet here they were. And what was a 6-year-old doing there as well? Sigh. Forget it. Father, there is something that we would like to request of you, the oldest daughter said. So you all are requesting, was it? If I didn't know any better, I would have thought that you all were giving me orders. As he raised his voice, his daughters began to shiver and tremble with fear. But they quickly took in big gulps of air and calmed themselves down. It was now or never. Father, we would like to be allowed to participate in the battle for kingship. Father, I want to be queen. Father, it's only fair that you pick me to be queen, since I'm the oldest in the family. Father, I promise to do a good job as well. When the princesses realized that their father wasn't saying anything, they quieted down, and the room instantly turned dead silent. Ha 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 ha. This must be the biggest joke that I have heard all year. What makes you think that you all can rule an empire? For the fact that you all didn't even think things through shows me how stupid and naive you all are. You think that you all can compare to Queen Penelope. Ha ha ha, what a joke. At age 7, she began sword practice. Since then, she had been practicing her skills for 11 years now. She had also been studying the art of war throughout those years, as well as participating in several battles for her empire. In addition, she aided in trades and all monetary deals and positions in Corona. Did you all think that she was given that position because of favoritism? Ha ha ha. I've met her before, and I can assure every one of you that she is more outstanding than most men. But you all, what do you know? Looking at boys, doing needlework, gossiping? Can any of you tell me how to run an empire? Do you even know all the cities, towns, and villages within the Jotun? Can any of you go to battle and come back alive? I had heard previously that some of you faint whenever you see little traces of blood, or even things like spiders. Do you all know how to handle government positions? Before this matter came out, were any of you ever interested in the empire itself? I remember that I used to order and force your mothers to allow you all to study. And you stand there to tell me to allow you all to rule my empire? As what? As jesters? Do you want to ruin it for me? You all coming here without thinking shows me that you all would make stupid rulers whom anyone can control. Without even knowing or verifying all details from the news you heard, you immediately started causing havoc around my empire. Ask yourselves, could you all do what Queen Penelope did? Get back to our rooms and pray for brains. Once McLean finished speaking, the girls all burst out into tears and ran off. As he looked at them running, he couldn't help but feel immense disappointment. There was no bravery, no courage, no qualities that could even make them 1/3 of Queen Penelope's attributes. Yet they dared to compare with her. McLean decided that he would address this matter publicly. He had to let these women know that it wasn't by favoritism that Penelope became ruler. He would not allow any woman to feel entitled to anything unless they were truly capable of doing the job required. Should he just give them government positions when most of them didn't even know how to read or write? Bullsh ***. McLean was sure that if 80% of these women were actually tortured, they would confess all the secrets that they had learned in these government positions. Even after giving them equal jobs, they still couldn't perform the same as men, hence their pay was still less. Many women started working at building sites and had found out the hard way that a man's innate strength was generally stronger than that of women. If the men there could carry 40 large stones a day, those women could only about 20 or 23 large stones a day. And because of this, they immediately shut their traps about equal pay. They decided to let the equal pay matter go, but they still wanted every other benefit without having the right qualifications. This why McLean decided to address the matter publicly, as well as to explain Penelope's success story to them. How dare they think that they all were as good as Penelope? Penelope's brain from an early age was quick-witted and fast. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge. She was rare a genius. Please. He would rather believe that the world was round than to believe that all the women were like Penelope. Truth be told, when he first saw Penelope, she was 10 years old and had greatly impressed him. He immediately rushed back to Jotun and wanted his own daughters to learn as well. But the heavens were truly cruel to him. Most of his daughters only learned when forced, and weren't even interested in any physical exercises. Only his 9th daughter and the other one that was banished from Jotun were able to use their brains to some extent. And although he didn't spend time with his daughters, his personal guards and knights had been reporting their every move to him. In his opinion, they were just too disappointing to look at. King Carmelo, that old dog, was really too damn lucky to have such a daughter. Other people were having daughters like Penelope, and here he was with 11 daughters that all had coconut brains. He was sure that the fault lay in their mothers. There was no way that he would agree that his seed could produce such fools. Otherwise, how come his sons were brilliant, but his daughters were fools? The fault clearly didn't belong to him. His wives and concubines must have done or eaten something during their pregnancy. In the case for his daughters, he had to constantly force them to study, while in the case of his sons, he didn't even need to lift a muscle. And out of nowhere, his daughters now wanted to rule his empire with those fish brains of theirs. McLean would rather kill himself than to let any of his daughters succeed him. Just as he was going through his own problems with the women, the other rulers were also facing similar situations. But since those rulers governed their empires with fear, the women in these areas didn't even dare to voice out their complaints. Hence those empires were still somewhat peaceful. But the women in their palaces were a different matter altogether. Royal Palace, capital of Arcadina. Father, I would like to be the first queen of Arcadina. Jeanette Barnes said. Get out. Royal Palace, capital of Deiphorus. Father, if you do not make me queen, then I'll kill myself. Go ahead.